Hey there. Welcome back to Bedtime Chills. I know it's been a minute. Thanks for sticking around. I took a short break, but I'm back now with something a little different and just as chilling. Tonight, instead of horror fiction, we're diving into the eerie world of true crime. Real stories, real people, real chills. So, grab a blanket, let the rain and thunder set the mood, and settle in for 3 hours of unsettling true crime tales. If you're into this new direction, show some love, drop a like, share it around, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? What time of night is it for you? Leave a comment below. All right, let's get into it and let the chills begin.
In the quiet suburb of West Valley City, Utah, a chilling mystery began to unfold on a cold December morning in 2009. Susan Cox Powell, a 28-year-old mother of two, vanished without a trace, leaving behind a life that, on the surface, seemed idyllic but was fraught with tension and secrets. Her disappearance would spark a sprawling investigation, reveal a web of disturbing family dynamics, and culminate in a tragedy so horrific it shocked the nation. This is the story of Susan Cox Powell, a woman whose fate remains unknown, and the devastating events that followed her disappearance. Susan Marie Cox was born on October 16, 1981, in Alamogordo, New Mexico, to Chuck and Judy Cox, a close-knit couple who raised Susan and her sister Denise in a loving, faith-centered home. Susan was a vibrant, warm-hearted woman with a radiant smile and a deep commitment to her family and her faith in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS. As a trained cosmetologist, she was creative and hardworking, eventually taking a job at Wells Fargo Investments after moving to Utah. Her life seemed to follow a predictable, wholesome path until she met Joshua Powell, a man who would change the course of her destiny. Josh Powell was born on January 20, 1976, in Puyallup, Washington, to Stephen and Terica Powell. The Powell family was dysfunctional, marked by Stephen's domineering personality and unconventional beliefs. After Stephen and Terica divorced in 1992, Josh and his brothers stayed with their father, who exposed them to pornography and fostered an environment lacking discipline. Josh grew up with a sense of entitlement and a volatile temperament, traits that would later strain his relationships. Susan and Josh met in November 2000 at an LDS Church Institute of Religion course in Tacoma, Washington. Susan, then 19, was drawn to Josh's charm and ambition. He was 24, pursuing a business degree, and seemed to offer stability. Their courtship was swift, and by April 2001, they married in the Portland, Oregon temple, a sacred milestone for the devout couple. They settled in West Valley City, a suburb of Salt Lake City, and welcomed two sons, Charlie Powell, born in 2005, and Braden Powell, born in 2007. To the outside world, the Powells were a typical Mormon family, but beneath the surface, their marriage was unraveling. Susan's friends noticed troubling signs early on. Josh was controlling, dictating household finances and even forcing Susan to bike 7 miles to work after he sold her car. By 2008, their marriage had reached a breaking point. Susan confided in friends like Kiersey Helluel that Josh was emotionally distant, refusing intimacy and displaying erratic behavior. She wrote in a handwritten will on June 28, 2008, "For family, friends of Susan, all except for Josh Powell husband, I don't trust him." She stored this document in a safe deposit box, along with savings bonds, signaling her growing fear. Susan also recorded a video documenting their assets, worried Josh might sell them off, as he had previously filed for bankruptcy with over $200,000 in debt. The Powell household was further complicated by Josh's father, Stephen Powell. For a brief period after their marriage, Susan and Josh lived with Stephen in South Hill, Washington. Stephen developed an obsessive infatuation with Susan, secretly filming her, stealing her underwear, and writing love songs about her. Susan was horrified when she discovered his behavior and told Josh. but he dismissed it, saying, "That's just Dad." This betrayal deepened Susan's sense of isolation, as she realized Josh would not protect her from his father's disturbing advances. On December 6, 2009, Susan was last seen alive. That Sunday, she attended church with Charlie and Braden, then returned home. A neighbor, Giovanna Owings, visited that afternoon, and Josh prepared a late lunch of pancakes. Susan, feeling unwell, went to rest around 5:30 p.m. and Owings left. According to Josh, he saw Susan sleeping on the couch before he left with their sons for a camping trip shortly after midnight on December 7th. The temperature that night dropped to 16 degrees, making the idea of camping with two young children in the Utah desert highly suspicious. The next morning, alarm bells rang. Susan and Josh failed to show up for work, and Charlie and Braden didn't arrive at daycare. Debbie Caldwell, their daycare provider, called Josh's sister, Jennifer Graves, and his mother, Terica Powell. Concerned, Jennifer and Terica contacted the police and went to the Powell home. Officers broke a window to enter, fearing carbon monoxide poisoning, but found the house empty. Susan's purse, wallet, and keys were in the master bedroom, and the living room couch was damp, with two box fans blowing on it, suggesting recent cleaning. Josh's cell phone was off, and Susan's was later found in his minivan, turned off, a detail that raised red flags. At around 5 p.m. on December 7th, Josh returned home with Charlie and Braden. Police were waiting in the driveway. He claimed he had taken the boys camping along the Pony Express Trail in Utah's West Desert, insisting Susan had stayed home. His story was inconsistent, and he seemed evasive. When questioned, 4-year-old Charlie told a detective that Susan had joined them on the camping trip, but didn't come home and stayed where the crystals are, a cryptic statement that haunted investigators. Weeks later, a teacher reported Charlie saying his mother was dead, and Braden, then 2, drew a picture at daycare of a van with 3 people, saying, "Mommy was in the trunk." Police searched the Powell home on December 8th and found blood on a tile floor near the damp couch, later confirmed to be Susan's. They also discovered a chunk of melted metal and charred wire scraps in Josh's minivan, which investigators suspected might be a destroyed cell phone or tool, possibly melted with an oxyacetylene torch Josh had purchased weeks earlier. A search warrant affidavit cited friends who said Josh had discussed how to dispose of a body in a mine shaft, and the couple's $1 million life insurance policy on Susan added a potential motive. Despite this evidence, Josh was named a person of interest but never arrested, as police lacked a body or sufficient evidence to charge him. As the investigation deepened, Josh's behavior grew more erratic. On December 14th, he retained an attorney and became increasingly uncooperative. A week after Susan's disappearance, he withdrew all the money from her IRA accounts, further fueling suspicion. By January 2010, he moved with Charlie and Braden to his father Stephen's home in Puyallup, Washington, claiming he wanted to escape media scrutiny. The move distanced him from Utah investigators, complicating their efforts. The Cox family, desperate for answers, clashed with the Powells. Chuck and Judy Cox accused Josh of involvement in Susan's disappearance, while Stephen and Josh claimed Susan was mentally unstable and had run off with another man, possibly Stephen Kocher, a missing Uton. Police dismissed this theory, finding no connection. Stephen's fixation on Susan intensified, and in 2011 he announced plans to publish her adolescent journals, claiming they showed her troubled nature. Susan's friend Kiersey Helluel called this a violation, noting Susan had never shared her journals. A judge later issued an injunction ordering Stephen and Josh to destroy or return the journals. In September 2011, the case took a darker turn. Police searched Stephen Powell's Puyallup home for evidence related to Susan's disappearance and uncovered disturbing material. Stephen had secretly recorded videos of Susan's body parts, smelled her underwear, and kept video diaries expressing his sexual obsession with her. They also found child pornography, including images of neighbor girls. Stephen was arrested on charges of voyeurism and possession of child pornography, and Charlie and Braden were removed from the home, placed in the custody of Chuck and Judy Cox. Josh, now under scrutiny, rented a house in Graham, Washington, to appear compliant with court orders for supervised visitation with his sons. However, authorities suspected he continued living with Stephen, using the rental as a facade. The Coxes, meanwhile, noticed Charlie and Braden starting to share troubling details. Braden's drawing of the van and Charlie's statements about the camping trip suggested they had witnessed something traumatic. Judy Cox told NBC's Today Show that Braden described Mommy and Daddy leaving during the camping trip, but only Daddy came back. By early 2012, Josh was unraveling. On February 1st, a judge ordered him to undergo a psychosexual evaluation and polygraph test before regaining custody, a ruling prompted by his father's arrest and ongoing suspicions about Susan's disappearance. Josh, facing mounting pressure, was allowed supervised visits at his Graham rental. On February 5, 2012, social worker Elizabeth Griffin Hall arrived with Charlie, 7, and Braden, 5, for a court-ordered visit. As the boys ran ahead, Josh pulled them inside, slammed the door, and locked Hall out. She pounded on the door, then called 911 reporting, "He blew up the house and the kids." Moments later, the house erupted in flames. Josh had attacked Charlie and Braden with a hatchet, doused the home with gasoline, and ignited it. The explosion killed Josh and his sons, who suffered for 10 to 20 minutes from smoke inhalation before succumbing. Investigators found 2 5-gallon gas cans, one ignited near the bodies. Just before the fire, Josh sent emails to his attorney and pastor, saying, "I'm sorry, goodbye," and left a voicemail for his sister, stating, "I am not able to live without my sons." The 911 operator, David Lavrick, was later reprimanded for taking 8 minutes to dispatch police, who arrived 13 minutes too late. The nation was stunned by the brutality of the murder-suicide. Chuck and Judy Cox, already grieving Susan's disappearance, were devastated by the loss of their grandsons. "I don't know anything else I could have done, and they're still dead," Chuck told ABC News. "My daughter's still missing, and now the children are dead." A funeral for Charlie and Braden was held on February 11, 2012, at an LDS Stake Center in Puyallup, open to the public as the community mourned. The Coxes channeled their grief into a legal battle, suing Washington's Department of Social and Health Services, DSHS, in 2013, alleging negligence in allowing supervised visits with Josh, despite his status as a suspect in Susan's presumed murder. In July 2020, a Pierce County jury awarded them $98.5 million, finding DSHS liable for the boys' pain and suffering. The verdict was reduced to $32.8 million by Judge Stanley Rumbaugh, who argued the amount shocked the conscience. In April 2023, a Washington appeals court reinstated the full $98.5 million, affirming the jury's finding that DSHS had ignored red flags, such as Josh's abduction risk noted by a social worker. Susan's case remains unsolved. On May 21, 2013, West Valley City Police closed their active investigation, concluding Josh likely killed Susan, possibly with help from his brother Michael, who died by suicide in February 2013. Her body has never been found, despite searches in Utah's West Desert, including a 2022 effort led by private citizen Dave Sparks, which uncovered bones later deemed inconclusive. Chuck Cox remains hopeful, attending annual vigils at Susan's Memorial Angel statue in Puyallup's Woodbine Cemetery. The evidence against Josh is compelling yet circumstantial. Susan's blood in the home, the damp couch, the melted metal, and the children's statements paint a grim picture. A 2019 Oxygen special, The Disappearance of Susan Cox Powell, revealed never-before-seen footage of Stephen's videos, underscoring the family's dysfunction. The 2018-19 podcast Cold, hosted by Dave Cawley, meticulously detailed the case, suggesting the melted metal was likely a power tool, not a phone, based on experiments. Susan's will, stating, "If I die, it may not be an accident," and her fear of Josh echoed through the investigation. The Susan Cox Powell case is a stark reminder of the complexities of domestic abuse and the failures of systems meant to protect the vulnerable. Susan's friends described her as loving and loyal, a mother who fought to save her marriage for her sons. Her disappearance exposed a marriage marked by control, betrayal, and fear, compounded by a father-in-law's obsession and a husband's unraveling psyche. The loss of Charlie and Braden amplified the tragedy, leaving the Cox family to seek justice through lawsuits and searches for Susan's remains. Today, Susan's story resonates as a call for reform in child welfare and domestic violence policies. Chuck and Judy Cox continue their quest for closure, hoping one day to find Susan's remains and lay her to rest beside her sons. The mystery endures, a haunting question mark over a family torn apart by secrets and violence. As Chuck told King 5 in 2023, her impact lives on, a testament to Susan's enduring spirit in the face of unimaginable loss.
In the quiet suburb of Balby, Doncaster, South Yorkshire, the morning of September 14, 2007, began like any other for the Gosden family. The air was crisp with the early autumn chill, and the streets were alive with the familiar rhythm of a new school term. Kevin and Glenys Gosden, both speech therapists, prepared for their workday, while their two children, Andrew and Charlotte, readied themselves for school. Andrew, a 14-year-old known for his sharp intellect and reserved demeanor, was just 8 days into his new term at Macaulay Catholic High School. He was a gifted student, a prize-winning mathematician with a promising future, and a boy who seemed content in the comforts of his close-knit family. But beneath this ordinary morning lay the beginning of a mystery that would captivate the nation, confound investigators, and leave a family in perpetual limbo. By the end of that day, Andrew Gosden would vanish, leaving behind a trail of questions that remain unanswered to this day. Andrew Paul Gosden was born on July 10, 1993, the younger of two children to Kevin and Glenys. Growing up in Doncaster, a town known for its industrial history and tight-knit communities, Andrew was surrounded by love and support. His parents, devout Christians, fostered an environment of trust and independence, encouraging their children to pursue their interests while maintaining open communication. Andrew's older sister, Charlotte, was 2 years his senior, and the siblings shared a bond typical of teenagers navigating the complexities of adolescence. The Gosden household on Littlemore Lane was a place of warmth, where family dinners and shared moments were cherished. From an early age, Andrew displayed an exceptional aptitude for academics, particularly mathematics. At Macaulay Catholic High School, he was enrolled in the Young Gifted and Talented program, a prestigious initiative designed to nurture the top 5% of students. Teachers described him as a quiet, diligent student who was expected to achieve straight A's in his GCSE examinations and potentially attend a university like Cambridge. His academic prowess was matched by a dry sense of humor and a reserved personality that endeared him to those who knew him well. Despite his intelligence, Andrew was not one to boast or seek attention. He preferred the company of a small group of friends and the comfort of his own space. Outside of school, Andrew's interests were eclectic but deeply personal. He was an avid fan of heavy metal music, with bands like Slipknot and Muse holding a special place in his heart. His bedroom was a testament to his tastes, adorned with posters of his favorite bands and patches of their logos sewn onto his black canvas satchel. Andrew also enjoyed video games, particularly on his PlayStation Portable, PSP, a handheld console he often carried with him. Unlike many teenagers of the era, Andrew was not tethered to technology. He had owned mobile phones in the past but rarely used them, losing them without much concern. When his parents offered to replace his lost phone, Andrew declined, expressing a preference for a new Xbox instead. His limited use of technology extended to the internet. The family did not have a personal computer at home, and Andrew's access to the web was restricted to school or public libraries. Andrew's life, by all accounts, appeared stable and fulfilling. He had no history of running away, no signs of depression, and no reported conflicts at home or school. His parents described him as a home bird, someone who rarely ventured far without informing them of his whereabouts. Yet, in the months leading up to his disappearance, subtle changes in Andrew's behavior went unnoticed. He had stopped attending church, a practice his family had once shared, and had withdrawn from the Cub Scouts, an activity he had previously enjoyed. These decisions were not seen as alarming at the time. They were attributed to the typical shifts of a teenager finding his own path. But in hindsight, these small deviations would become points of scrutiny for a family desperate for answers. On the morning of September 14, 2007, Andrew woke later than usual, a fact his mother, Glennice, noted as unusual. He seemed irritable, another departure from his typically calm demeanor. Dressed in his school uniform, a blazer, tie, and trousers, he left the house at 8:05 a.m., bidding farewell to his parents as he headed toward the school bus stop. The Gosdens assumed he was on his way to Macaulay Catholic High, a 15-minute bus ride away. But Andrew had other plans. Instead of boarding the bus, he diverted his route to Westfield Park, a small green space across from the family home. There, he was spotted by a family friend, Reverend Alan Murray, sitting on a bench in his school uniform. Murray, driving by, thought little of it, assuming Andrew was taking a shortcut to the bus stop. Unbeknownst to his family, Andrew waited in the park until he was certain his parents and sister had left for the day. He then returned home, an action captured on a neighbor's CCTV system. Inside, he placed his school uniform in the washing machine and hung his blazer on the back of a chair, as if maintaining the illusion of a normal school day. He changed into casual clothes, a black Slipknot t-shirt, black jeans and trainers, and grabbed his wallet, keys, and PSP, leaving the charger behind. Notably, he also took his black canvas satchel, decorated with patches of rock and metal bands, which his family later noted appeared fuller than usual, suggesting he might have packed additional items. At around 8:30 a.m., Andrew was seen leaving the house again, this time heading down Littlemore Lane toward Westfield Park. He walked to a nearby garage, where he withdrew 200 pounds from his bank account using an ATM, nearly depleting his savings of 214 pounds. Curiously, he left behind approximately 100 pounds in cash from birthday gifts, stored in his bedroom, a decision that would later puzzle investigators. From the garage, Andrew made his way to Doncaster Railway Station, a short walk away. At the ticket counter, he purchased a one-way ticket to London King's Cross, declining the option of a return ticket despite it being only slightly more expensive. Witnesses, including the ticket seller, noted that Andrew was alone and appeared unremarkable, a quiet teenager engrossed in his own thoughts. Andrew boarded the 9:35 a.m. train to London, a journey of about 2 hours. A woman who sat near him on the train later recalled that he was quiet, focused on playing his PSP, and showed no signs of distress. At 11:25 a.m., CCTV footage captured Andrew exiting King's Cross Station, his satchel slung over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. He walked out of the station's main entrance, blending into the bustling crowds of central London. This grainy image, frozen in time, would become the last confirmed sighting of Andrew Gosden. Back in Doncaster, the day unfolded without incident for the Gosden family. Kevin and Glennice went about their work, and Charlotte attended her classes. At Macaulay Catholic High, Andrew's absence was noted, but a critical error delayed the response. School staff attempted to contact his parents to report his truancy, but misdialed the number, leaving a message with the wrong family. As a result, Andrew's absence was not communicated to his parents until much later. At home, Kevin and Glennice assumed Andrew was in his room or the converted cellar, playing video games or doing homework. It wasn't until around 7 p.m., when they realized he hadn't been home all day, that panic set in. The Gosdens called Andrew's friends, only to learn he hadn't been at school. They searched the local area, contacting neighbors and checking familiar places, but found no trace of him. At 7 p.m., they reported him missing to South Yorkshire Police, sparking the beginning of an investigation that would span years. The police initially treated Andrew's case as that of a runaway, a common occurrence among teenagers. They interviewed the family, probing for signs of abuse, neglect, or conflict, but found none. Kevin and Glennice were adamant that Andrew had an open, trusting relationship with them, and there were no indications of bullying or distress at school. 3 days after Andrew's disappearance, police confirmed he had traveled to London after speaking with the Doncaster ticket seller. This revelation shifted the focus of the investigation to the capital, but it also exposed critical missteps. The police did not request CCTV footage from King's Cross until 27 days after Andrew's disappearance, by which time much of the footage had been overwritten. This delay infuriated the Gosden family, who felt the investigation was disorganized and slow. Kevin later criticized South Yorkshire Police, stating, "The handling of the investigation was too slow, too chaotic, and disorganized." A credible sighting reported by a woman who claimed to have seen Andrew at a Pizza Hut on Oxford Street in Covent Garden on September 14th was also mishandled. Police waited 6 weeks to follow up, by which time the lead had gone cold. As days turned into weeks, the Gosdens took matters into their own hands. They distributed missing person flyers across Doncaster and London, plastering train stations, bus stops, and public spaces with Andrew's image. They made frequent media appearances, appealing for information and keeping Andrew's case in the public eye. The family also hired a private firm in 2011 to search the River Thames using sonar technology, hoping to find clues, but the effort yielded no results. Despite their tireless efforts, no concrete evidence of Andrew's whereabouts emerged. Theories about Andrew's disappearance proliferated, each offering a possible explanation for why a seemingly happy teenager would travel to London without a word. One theory suggested he had gone to attend a concert or event. Andrew's love for heavy metal music led investigators to examine shows happening in London around the time of his disappearance. Bands like 30 Seconds to Mars and SICTH performed in the days following September 14th, and Finnish band Him held a promotional signing and an invitation-only show on September 17th. While Andrew was a fan of similar bands, there was no evidence he attended these events, and his family questioned why he would travel alone to a concert without informing them, especially given his shy nature. Another theory posited that Andrew had gone to London to visit museums or exhibitions, activities he enjoyed during family trips to the capital. His parents had suggested he visit his grandmother in London during the 2007 summer holidays, but he had declined, making this explanation seem unlikely. Some speculated that Andrew might have been seeking work experience, as his sister Charlotte had done at 14 by handing out CVs in London. However, Kevin later acknowledged that allowing such independence at that age was perhaps irresponsible, and there was no evidence Andrew was pursuing this goal. A darker hypothesis was that Andrew had been groomed, either online or in person. Although he had limited internet access and no personal computer, it was possible he used public computers at school or a library to communicate with someone. His PSP, which had an internet browser, could also have been used to access chat rooms without registering for PlayStation Network services, a fact not widely known at the time. Police thoroughly checked Andrew's devices and school computers but found no evidence of online activity. The possibility of in-person grooming was also explored, with investigators looking into Andrew's past involvement with the Cub Scouts and church, but no leads emerged. The idea that Andrew had run away to start a new life was considered but deemed improbable. His decision to leave behind £100 in cash and take only his PSP without a charger suggested he did not plan to be gone long. His lack of street smarts and young appearance, many noted he looked closer to 12 than 14, made it unlikely he could sustain himself in a city as vast and unforgiving as London. The most heartbreaking theory was that Andrew had gone to London with the intention of taking his own life. The River Thames, searched years later, was a focal point for this hypothesis, but no body was ever found, and the absence of any suicidal ideation in Andrew's behavior made this scenario difficult for his family to accept. The emotional toll on the Gosden family was profound. Kevin, overwhelmed by grief and the lack of answers, quit his job as a speech therapist and battled severe depression, culminating in a suicide attempt that led to 15 weeks in a psychiatric hospital. Glennice found solace in keeping busy, continuing her work while tirelessly advocating for Andrew. Charlotte, who was 16 at the time of her brother's disappearance, faced the challenge of growing up in the shadow of a tragedy. The family's faith and resilience kept them united, but the uncertainty of Andrew's fate left them in a state of perpetual limbo. In December 2021, a significant development reignited hope. South Yorkshire Police, in collaboration with the Metropolitan Police, arrested two men in London, a 38-year-old and a 45-year-old, on suspicion of kidnap and human trafficking in connection with Andrew's disappearance. The older man was also arrested for possessing indecent images of children. The arrests, the first in the case, prompted speculation about a breakthrough. Police seized electronic devices, warning that analysis could take 6 to 12 months. Kevin issued a cautious statement, saying, "We understand that police investigations will take several months to complete, so until that is the case, we do not know what to think and do not wish to speculate on any possible outcome." For the Gosdens, the arrests intensified their emotional journey, raising hopes that were tempered by years of disappointment. In September 2023, South Yorkshire Police announced that the two men had been eliminated from the investigation, with Detective Chief Inspector Andy Knowles stating he was confident the two men arrested played no part in Andrew's disappearance. The Gosdens expressed empathy for the men, saying, "Our hearts go out to the men who have been exonerated of any involvement in Andrew's disappearance. They have no connection to our missing son, and we feel profoundly sorry for the inevitable distress that such allegations will have caused." Despite the setback, the family thanked the police for their thorough investigation, but admitted they felt no closer to discovering what has happened to Andrew. The case remains open, with South Yorkshire Police urging anyone with information to come forward. Over the years, alleged sightings of Andrew have surfaced, including a 2008 report of a man claiming to have seen him in Shrewsbury and a 2009 sighting in a London bookshop, but none have been substantiated. The Gosdens have continued their advocacy, working with the charity Missing People, where Kevin serves as an ambassador, educating young people about staying safe if they consider running away. They have also pursued new age-progressed images of Andrew, hoping to spark recognition, and requested additional CCTV footage through Freedom of Information requests. The disappearance of Andrew Gosden is a haunting enigma, a case that defies easy answers. Was he lured to London by someone he trusted? Did he go to chase a fleeting adventure only to meet with tragedy? Or did he simply vanish into the chaos of a city that swallows thousands daily? The grainy CCTV image of Andrew at King's Cross, his satchel slung over his shoulder, remains a poignant symbol of a life interrupted. For Kevin, Glennice, and Charlotte, the search for Andrew is not just a quest for answers, but a testament to their unwavering love. As Kevin once told the Thin Air podcast, Andrew's case taught him that even a child with a secure, comfortable life can be drawn to the allure of the unknown, believing the grass might be greener elsewhere. Today, Andrew would be 31 years old. His family holds on to hope, however faint, that he is still out there, living a life they cannot reach. They continue to appeal to the public, asking anyone with information to contact South Yorkshire Police or Missing People. The case of Andrew Gosden is more than a mystery. It is a story of loss, resilience, and the enduring power of a family's love. As the years pass, the question lingers. What happened to Andrew Gosden on that fateful day in London? And will the truth ever come to light? In the quiet, sun-drenched suburb of Frederick, Colorado, the Watts family lived in a spacious 5-bedroom home on Saratoga Trail, a picture of suburban bliss that masked a brewing storm. To the outside world, Chris Watts, a 33-year-old oil field operator, and his 34-year-old wife, Sean N., were the epitome of the American dream. They had two beautiful daughters, Bella, aged 4, and Celeste, aged 3, with a third child, a boy to be named Nico, on the way. Shanann's frequent Facebook posts painted a vibrant portrait of a loving family, filled with laughter, vacations, and milestones. But beneath this curated facade, tensions simmered, secrets festered, and a tragedy of unimaginable horror was about to unfold. The events of August 2018 would not only shatter the Watts family, but also captivate the nation, exposing the chilling depths of human betrayal and violence. Chris and Shanann's story began in 2010, when a mutual friend connected them on Facebook. Shanann, originally from Aberdeen, North Carolina, was navigating a difficult period, grappling with health issues and a recent divorce. Chris, a reserved man from Spring Lake, North Carolina, sent her a friend request, sparking a connection that Shanann later described as transformative. "I was in a really, really bad place, and I got a friend request from Chris on Facebook," she shared in a video posted online just months before her death. "One thing led to another, and 8 years later, we have 2 kids, we live in Colorado, and he's the best thing that's ever happened to me." Their romance blossomed quickly, and they married on November 3, 2012, in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. By 2013, they had settled in Frederick, Colorado, purchasing their dream home and welcoming their first daughter, Bella Marie. 2 years later, Celeste Catherine, nicknamed Cece, joined the family, completing what appeared to be a perfect unit. Life in Frederick, however, wasn't without its challenges. The Watts family faced financial strain, declaring bankruptcy in 2015 after accumulating debt from medical bills and living expenses. Chris worked as an operator for Anadarko Petroleum, a steady but demanding job that often took him to remote oil fields. Shanann, meanwhile, worked from home, selling Thrive, a health and wellness product for the multi-level marketing company Louvel. Her frequent business trips and social media presence showcased a glamorous, aspirational lifestyle, but they also hinted at the pressure she felt to maintain appearances. Despite these struggles, Shanann's love for her family shone through. She doted on Bella and Celeste, documenting their every milestone, and was thrilled about her third pregnancy, sharing the news on Facebook with a video of Chris's delighted reaction. Yet, by the summer of 2018, cracks in the Watts marriage began to surface. Shanann confided in friends about Chris's growing distance. "He has changed. I don't know who he is," she texted a friend on August 7th, her voice heavy with worry. "He hasn't touched me all week, kissed me, talked to me except when I'm trying to figure out what is wrong." Unbeknownst to Shanann, Chris had begun an affair with Nicole Kessinger, a 30-year-old co-worker at Anadarko. Their relationship, which started in June 2018 while Shanann was visiting family in North Carolina, was a whirlwind of passion and deception. Chris lied to Kessinger, claiming he was in the process of divorcing Sean and that his marriage was all but over. He involved Kessinger in his search for a new apartment and even researched secluded vacation spots with her, all while Shanann fought to save their relationship. On August 13, 2018, the facade of the Watts family's perfect life collapsed. Shanann returned home from a business trip to Arizona around 1:48 a.m., dropped off by her friend and colleague Nicole Atkinson. Exhausted but hopeful, she entered the house where Chris and their daughters were sleeping. What happened in the hours that followed remains a subject of intense scrutiny, pieced together from Chris's confessions, forensic evidence, and investigative reports. According to Chris, he and Shanann had an emotional conversation that morning, during which he admitted to his affair and expressed his desire for a divorce. Shanann, devastated, reportedly told him, "You're not going to see the kids again." In a moment of rage, Chris strangled her in their bedroom, ending her life and that of their unborn son, Nico. The horror didn't end there. As Chris wrapped Shanann's body in a bedsheet, four-year-old Bella walked into the room, her small voice trembling as she asked, "What are you doing to Mommy?" Chris, now committed to an unthinkable path, told the girls their mother wasn't feeling well. He carried Shanann's body to his work truck, placing her on the floorboard, and instructed Bella and Celeste to climb into the back seat. For 45 agonizing minutes, he drove to a remote oil site owned by Anadarko, his daughters witnessing their mother's lifeless body. At the site, Chris smothered Celeste first, shoving her body through an 8-inch hatch into an oil tank filled with crude oil. Bella, watching in terror, pleaded, "Daddy, no. Is the same thing gonna happen to me as Cece?" Chris, unmoved, smothered her too, forcing her body into a second oil tank. He buried Sean, and in a shallow grave nearby, her body curled in a fetal position, a final act of callousness that separated the family even in death. Returning home, Chris acted as if nothing had happened. He texted Shanann's phone, asking where she was, and contacted police to report his wife and daughters missing. That afternoon, Nicole Atkinson, alarmed by Shanann's unresponsiveness and the presence of her car, medications, and children's car seats at home, called the police for a welfare check. Officers arrived at the Watts residence, joined by Chris, who appeared nervous but cooperative. A neighbor, Nathan Trinastick, offered crucial evidence. Surveillance footage from his security camera showing Chris loading his truck in the early morning hours of August 13th. The footage captured Chris backing his truck into the garage, loading a gas can and other items, and driving away, alone. This contradicted Chris's claim that Sean had taken the girls to a playdate and never returned. As the investigation intensified, the community rallied around the missing family. Neighbors placed flowers at a makeshift memorial outside the Watts home, and Shanann's family and friends pleaded for answers. Shanann's mother, Sandra Razusek, immediately suspected Chris, calling police to report his strange behavior. "He's acting weird," she told them, her instincts proving tragically accurate. On August 14th, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation issued an endangered missing alert, and Chris gave a chilling television interview with Denver 7, pleading for his family's safe return. "I just want them back," he said, his voice flat and his demeanor oddly detached. "This is a nightmare I can't wake up from." Viewers and investigators alike noted his lack of emotion, a stark contrast to the grief expected from a distraught husband and father. Behind the scenes, investigators were closing in. On August 15th, Chris was brought in for questioning and agreed to take a polygraph test. The results were damning. He failed spectacularly. Confronted with the evidence, including the neighbor's surveillance footage and inconsistencies in his story, Chris's facade began to crumble. He asked to speak to his father, Ronnie Watts, who had flown in from North Carolina. In a recorded conversation, Chris admitted to killing Sean but spun a false narrative, claiming he acted in a rage after catching her strangling the girls following their discussion about separation. "I saw her hurting them," he told his father, "and I just freaked out." Investigators didn't buy it. The forensic evidence, including the absence of defensive wounds on Sean and the condition of the girls' bodies, pointed to Chris as the sole perpetrator. That same day, investigators located the bodies. Shanann's shallow grave was discovered near 2 oil tanks at the Anadarko site where Chris worked. Inside the tanks, submerged in crude oil, were the bodies of Bella and Celeste, their nightgowns still clinging to their small frames. The discovery was gut-wrenching. Weld County District Attorney Michael Rourke later described the scene. "Looking at those oil tanks and seeing the size of the hatch at the top, and then to have to pull them out of that oil, I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy." Bella's body bore scratches on her buttocks, evidence of the force used to shove her through the narrow hatch. The brutality of the act stunned even seasoned investigators, with Colorado Bureau of Investigation agent Tammy Lee recalling, "I can't get that image out of my head." On August 16th, Chris was arrested and charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder, unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and tampering with a deceased body. The nation watched in horror as details of the case emerged, fueled by the release of over 2,000 pages of documents by the Weld County District Attorney's Office on November 29, 2018. The files revealed a calculated lead-up to the murders. Chris's affair with Nicole Kessinger was a central focus, with text messages and search histories exposing his obsession. While Sean texted him, desperate to repair their marriage, Chris juggled messages with Kessinger, researching how it feels when someone says I love you and marrying your mistress. Kessinger, unaware of Shanann's pregnancy until news reports surfaced, cooperated fully with police, deleting raunchy texts out of embarrassment but providing critical details about Chris's lies. She told investigators she believed financial pressures, not just the affair, motivated the murders, though she admitted their relationship may have accelerated the process. The documents also painted a heartbreaking picture of Shanann's final days. Her texts to Chris were filled with pain and hope. I realized during this trip what's missing in our relationship, she wrote, trying to reconnect. Chris, meanwhile, searched for Metallica's Battery, with lyrics like, "Cannot kill the family," hours after the murders, a chilling glimpse into his mindset. Shanann's friends and family, particularly her brother Frankie Rzusek, were vocal in their grief and anger, calling Chris a heartless psychopath who stole my whole world. A candlelight vigil in North Carolina drew hundreds, mourning Sean and Bella, Celeste, and Nico, whose loss left an indelible void. On November 6, 2018, in a stunning turn, Chris pleaded guilty to all 9 charges against him, including 5 counts of first-degree murder, as part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. The decision blindsided Shanann's family, who were not consulted and learned of it through the media. At the sentencing hearing on November 19th, Weld County Judge Marcelo Kopkow called the crimes perhaps the most inhumane and vicious he had ever seen, sentencing Chris to 5 life sentences without parole, plus 48 years for Nico's death and 36 years for tampering with the bodies. Prosecutors revealed harrowing details. Bella had fought back, her small body bearing marks of resistance. Chris's motive, they argued, was a desire for a fresh start with Kessinger, unburdened by his family. In February 2019, from a maximum security prison in Wisconsin, where he was transferred for safety reasons, Chris gave a 5-hour interview to investigators, offering a fuller confession. For the first time, he admitted to killing his daughters, recounting their final moments with a detachment that chilled listeners. He described Bella's plea, "Daddy, no," and admitted to earlier attempts to smother the girls at home, which failed when they woke up bruised and traumatized. He also confessed to slipping Sean an oxycodone, hoping to induce a miscarriage, a detail later corroborated in letters to author Sherilyn Cadle. In these letters, published in 2020, Chris wrote, "Her eyes filled with blood. As she looked at me and she died. I knew she was gone when she relieved herself." The graphic account, coupled with his claim of being free to be with Nikki after the murders, underscored his lack of remorse. Life in prison has been isolating for Chris. At Dodge Correctional Facility, he faced disciplinary actions for unauthorized communication and contraband possession, losing phone and canteen privileges. He kept photos of Sean and the girls in his cell, a gesture the Department of Corrections deemed permissible despite public outcry. Reports surfaced of Chris corresponding with women, some sending him provocative photos, drawn to his notoriety. He claimed to have found faith, identifying as a man of God and keeping a Bible, though Shanann's family dismissed this as manipulation. In 2022, Shanann's parents, Frank and Sandra Rzusek, spoke to CBS Colorado about ongoing harassment from conspiracy theorists who falsely claimed Sean and killed the girls. The Rzuseks, who won a $6 million wrongful death lawsuit against Chris, continue to honor their daughter's memory, advocating for her truth. The Watts case has left an indelible mark on true crime discourse, spawning documentaries like Netflix's American Murder, The Family Next Door, and countless analyses on platforms like Oxygen and Lifetime. It's a story of betrayal, where a man who seemed to have it all, a loving wife, adorable daughters, a stable life, chose to destroy it for a fleeting fantasy. The neighbor's surveillance footage, Shanann's heartfelt texts, and Bella's final plea remain etched in the public's consciousness, a haunting reminder of the fragility of trust. For investigators like Tammy Lee, the case was a psychological toll, with images of the oil tanks seared into their minds. For the Razuseks, it's a lifelong grief, tempered by their resolve to keep Sean, Bella, Celeste, and Nico's light alive. As Chris what serves his life sentences, the question of why lingers. Was it the affair, financial stress, or a deeper sociopathy that drove him? Former FBI profiler Candace DeLong noted that family annihilators like Chris are rare, often driven by a need for control and an inability to face failure. Unlike most, Chris didn't take his own life, choosing instead to live with the weight of his actions, or perhaps without it, given his chilling detachment. The Watts family murders stand as a stark warning. Evil can lurk behind the most ordinary doors, and love, no matter how deep, cannot always save. In the early morning hours of June 7, 1992, a quiet neighborhood in Springfield, Missouri, became the backdrop for one of the most perplexing mysteries in American true crime history. Three women, Cheryl Levitt, her daughter Suzanne "Susie" Streeter, and Susie's friend Stacy McCall, vanished without a trace from a modest home at 1717 East Delmar Street. The case, dubbed the Springfield Three, has haunted investigators, families, and the community for over 3 decades, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions, speculative theories, and a lingering sense of unease. Despite thousands of tips, extensive searches, and relentless media coverage, the fate of the 3 women remains unknown, making this one of the most enduring cold cases in the United States. The story begins with a moment of celebration. On June 6, 1992, Susie Streeter, 19, and Stacy McCall, 18, were basking in the joy of their high school graduation from Kickapoo High School. The day was filled with the excitement of new beginnings, as the 2 friends joined classmates at Hammond Student Center for the ceremony. Susie, a vibrant young woman with shoulder-length bleached blonde hair and a petite frame, was known for her outgoing personality and close bond with her mother, Cheryl Levitt. Stacy, with her dark blonde hair and dimpled smile, was equally spirited, eager to embrace the next chapter of her life. The 2 had planned to celebrate their milestone by attending graduation parties before heading to Cheryl's home for the night. Cheryl Levitt, 47, was a respected cosmetologist in Springfield, known for her warm demeanor and dedication to her craft. Standing at 5 feet tall with short, curly blonde hair, Cheryl was a single mother who had raised Susie and her older brother, Bart, with love and resilience. That evening, while Susie and Stacy were out celebrating, Cheryl spent a quiet night at home, speaking with a friend on the phone around 9:30 p.m. about a furniture painting project. It was a mundane detail, one that would later become a critical piece of the timeline, as it marked one of the last known contacts with Cheryl before the disappearance. The evening unfolded as expected for Susie and Stacy. After the graduation ceremony, they attended a party at a friend's house in Battlefield, a nearby community. Their plan was to spend the night there and then head to Branson the next day for a fun outing at a water park. However, as the night wore on, the party grew crowded, prompting Susie and Stacy to change their plans. Around 2:15 a.m., they left the Battlefield party and drove to Cheryl's home on Delmar Street, where they intended to spend the night. A neighbor reported seeing them arrive, marking the last confirmed sighting of the 2 young women. What happened next remains a mystery. Sometime between 2:15 a.m. and the early morning hours of June 7th, Cheryl Levitt, Susie Streeter, and Stacy McCall disappeared from the Delmar Street home. When friends and family arrived at the house later that day, they were met with an eerie scene. The house appeared undisturbed, with no signs of a struggle, yet the three women were gone. Their personal belongings, purses, keys, clothing, and even their vehicles, remained behind, untouched. The family dog, a Yorkshire Terrier named Cinnamon, was left alone in the house, adding to the unsettling atmosphere. The only anomaly was a shattered porch light, its glass scattered on the ground, though the bulb itself still functioned. The discovery of the women's absence began with Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, who grew concerned when she couldn't reach her daughter by phone on the morning of June 7th. Stacy had promised to call Janice if her plans changed, and the lack of communication was out of character. Janice drove to Cheryl's home around midday, joined by a friend of Susie's who was also worried after failing to reach her. Upon entering the house, they found the women's purses neatly clustered on the steps leading to Susie's bedroom. Stacy's clothes from the previous night were folded carefully, and Cheryl's bed appeared to have been slept in. A Dr. Seuss book, "Oh, the Places You'll Go," lay on Susie's headboard alongside an ashtray and a soda can. Small, poignant reminders of a life interrupted. The scene was confounding. There were no signs of forced entry, no blood, no overturned furniture. The women's cars, a red Mazda belonging to Susie, a green Ford belonging to Cheryl, and Stacy's vehicle, were parked in the driveway. Their cigarettes, jewelry, and money were left behind, suggesting they hadn't planned to leave voluntarily. The front door was unlocked, which was unusual for Cheryl, who was known to be cautious. The broken porch light raised questions. Had it been deliberately smashed to obscure an abduction, or was it an unrelated accident? The absence of any clear evidence left investigators with little to work with, and the clock was already ticking. Janice McCall contacted the Springfield Police Department, and officers arrived at the scene on the afternoon of June 7th. The initial response was hampered by the lack of obvious foul play. The house didn't look like a crime scene in the traditional sense, and some officers initially wondered if the women had simply left of their own accord. However, the presence of their belongings and the family's insistence that the women would not have vanished without a word prompted a more serious investigation. Unfortunately, the early hours of the case were compromised by an influx of well-meaning friends and family who entered the home, potentially contaminating evidence. One friend even swept up the broken glass from the porch light, unaware that it might have been significant. As the investigation began, police pieced together a timeline. Cheryl was last heard from at 11:15 p.m. on June 6th during her phone conversation. Susie and Stacy were last seen leaving the battlefield party around 2:15 a.m. on June 7th. The window of opportunity for their disappearance was narrow, likely between 2:15 a.m. and 7:30 a.m., when neighbors began stirring and would have noticed any unusual activity. The police issued a missing persons report and began interviewing friends, family, and acquaintances, hoping to uncover a motive or a suspect. The Springfield community rallied in response to the disappearance. Friends and strangers alike joined search efforts, scouring rural areas, wooded regions, and bodies of water like Lake Springfield. Volunteers distributed flyers featuring photos of Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy, their smiling faces a stark contrast to the grim reality of their absence. The media descended on Springfield, with local news outlets providing daily updates and national programs like America's Most Wanted eventually covering the case. The story of the Springfield Three captured the public's imagination, not only because of its mystery but also because it shattered the sense of safety in a close-knit Midwestern town. Investigators pursued several theories early on. One possibility was that Cheryl Levitt was the primary target. As a single woman living alone, she might have attracted the attention of someone with malicious intent. Her home was a known location, and she was the only one expected to be there that night, as Susie and Stacy's decision to stay over was impromptu. This theory suggested that an intruder, unaware of the two younger women's presence, might have been surprised by their arrival, escalating the situation into a triple abduction. Another theory posited that the crime was random, committed by a predator who spotted Susie and Stacy driving home in Susie's distinctive red Mazda, which bore a personalized license plate, Sweeter. An FBI profiler suggested that a single perpetrator, likely a sexual sadist, could have followed the women to the Delmar Street home, using a gun to subdue them without a struggle. The profiler noted that the suspect was probably familiar with the area, possibly someone who blended into the community and didn't appear threatening to those who knew him. A larger vehicle, such as a van, would have been necessary to transport 3 victims, adding another layer of complexity to the investigation. The police interviewed several individuals in the days following the disappearance. Susie's ex-boyfriend, Dustin Rekla, was an early person of interest. He and Susie had a tumultuous relationship, and he had recently been involved in a vandalism incident at a local cemetery, which Susie had reported to the police. Rekla was questioned and polygraphed, but he provided an alibi and was eventually cleared. Bart Streeter, Susie's brother and Cheryl's son, was also interviewed. Estranged from the family and struggling with alcoholism, Bart admitted to heavy drinking on the night of June 6th, claiming he passed out and had no knowledge of the women's whereabouts. He, too, passed a polygraph and was not considered a suspect. As the investigation deepened, attention turned to Robert Craig Cox, a convicted criminal with a troubling history. Cox had been in Springfield at the time of the disappearance, having recently been released from prison in Florida, where he was convicted of murdering a woman. He had also worked at the same car lot as Stacy McCall's father, establishing a loose connection to one of the victims. In a 1996 interview, Cox made chilling statements, claiming he knew the women were dead and buried in Springfield, though he stopped short of confessing. His alibi, that he was home alone in bed, was unverifiable, and his criminal background made him a compelling suspect. However, no physical evidence linked Cox to the crime, and he was never charged. He is currently serving a life sentence in Texas for robbery and will be eligible for parole in 2025. Another suspect, Gerald Carnahan, emerged as a person of interest due to his violent history. A wealthy businessman, Carnahan was named a suspect in the 1985 murder of Jackie Johns in Nixa, Missouri, and was later convicted of other crimes, including the 1987 murder of Debbie Sue Lewis. His proximity to Springfield and his pattern of targeting women made him a plausible candidate, but like Cox, there was no concrete evidence tying him to the Springfield Three. Carnahan died in prison in 2021, taking any potential secrets to the grave. The investigation explored various leads, some more credible than others. A tip from a motorcycle gang member pointed to a hog farm in Webster County, owned by a convicted murderer who died in 1995. Police searched the property in 1993 but found nothing. Another lead suggested the women's bodies might be buried in the Mark Twain National Forest, but extensive searches yielded no results. In 2002, investigators examined a concrete company in Webster County after 2 women reported seeing a green van similar to one sought in the case. But again, no evidence was found. A local reporter's theory that the women were buried beneath a parking lot at Cox Hospital gained traction, but was debunked after ground-penetrating radar revealed no anomalies. The Springfield Police Department, with assistance from the FBI and the Missouri State Highway Patrol, followed nearly 5,000 tips over the years. They conducted searches across southwest Missouri, interviewed countless individuals, and even convened a grand jury in 1996, but no charges were ever filed. The case went cold, but its impact on the community endured. Vigils were held, and the faces of Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy remained on posters and in storefronts, a constant reminder of the unresolved tragedy. For the families, the pain of not knowing was unbearable. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, became a tireless advocate for missing persons, co-founding One Missing Link Incorporated to support other families. She vowed never to declare Stacy dead without definitive proof, holding on to hope that her daughter might still be alive. There's not a word called closure in the dictionary for families missing someone, Janice told People magazine in 2023. Bart Streeter, despite his estrangement, expressed profound grief over the loss of his mother and sister, grappling with the mystery that appended his life. The case also left a mark on Springfield's collective psyche. Residents locked their doors more diligently, and parents kept closer tabs on their children. The disappearance highlighted the vulnerability of even the safest-seeming communities, prompting local authorities to increase efforts in crime prevention and public safety education. The Springfield Three became a cautionary tale, a reminder that danger could lurk in the most unexpected places. Media coverage kept the case alive, with documentaries, podcasts, and articles revisiting the mystery. And Roderick Jones, a Springfield native, launched a podcast titled The Springfield Three, a small-town disappearance, which brought renewed attention to the case. Her work, along with the efforts of amateur sleuths like Drew Stevens, a young Springfield resident who became obsessed with solving the mystery, ensured that the women's story was not forgotten. Online forums and social media platforms buzzed with theories, ranging from plausible to outlandish, as people tried to make sense of the inexplicable. One enduring question is why the case has remained unsolved. The lack of physical evidence is a significant hurdle. Without blood, fingerprints, or DNA, investigators have little to work with. The early contamination of the crime scene, while unintentional, may have destroyed critical clues. The absence of witnesses, despite the crime occurring in a residential neighborhood, adds to the challenge. Some believe the perpetrator was someone known to the women, who acted quickly and discreetly, while others argue it was a stranger who seized a fleeting opportunity. The truth, if it ever emerges, may lie in a combination of these factors. As of April 2025, the Springfield 3 case remains open, listed as a cold case on the Springfield Police Department's website. A $43,000 reward is offered for information leading to the location and prosecution of those responsible. Advances in forensic technology, such as DNA analysis, offer hope that new evidence might one day provide a breakthrough. Until then, the mystery endures, a haunting chapter in Springfield's history that refuses to be closed. The story of Cheryl Levitt, Susie Streeter, and Stacy McCall is more than a true crime puzzle. It is a human tragedy that resonates with anyone who has ever loved and lost. Their disappearance stripped away the illusion of safety, leaving behind a community forever changed. For those who knew them, the pain is personal, a wound that time has not healed. For the rest of us, the Springfield Three is a reminder of life's fragility and the enduring power of hope, even in the face of the unknown. In the quiet, windswept dunes of Long Island's South Shore, where the Atlantic Ocean meets the sandy expanse of Gilgo Beach, a chilling mystery began to unfold in December 2010. What started as a search for a missing woman would soon reveal a grim tableau of death, exposing one of the most perplexing and haunting serial killer cases in modern American history. The Long Island serial killer, also known as the Gilgo Beach Killer, left a trail of at least 11 victims, most of them young women whose lives were tragically cut short. For over a decade, the case baffled investigators, terrorized communities, and captivated a nation desperate for answers. This is the story of the murders, the investigation, and the eventual arrest of a suspect who had been hiding in plain sight. The story begins with Shannon Gilbert, a 24-year-old sex worker from New Jersey, whose disappearance in May 2010 set the stage for the gruesome discoveries that followed. Shannon was last seen in the early morning hours of May 1, 2010, in Oak Beach, a gated community on Long Island's South Shore. She had been working as an escort and had arranged to meet a client, Joseph Brewer, at his home. After spending some time with Brewer, Shannon made a frantic 911 call at around 4:51 a.m., claiming that someone was trying to harm her. Her screams echoed through the call as she fled the house, running into the night. She knocked on the doors of nearby residents, pleading for help, but by the time police arrived, Shannon had vanished into the marshy thickets near Ocean Parkway. The search for Shannon was slow and initially met with skepticism from authorities, who suggested she might have drowned or succumbed to an accident in the marsh. But her family, particularly her mother, Mari Gilbert, refused to accept this explanation. They pressed for answers, hiring private investigators and pushing the Suffolk County Police Department to take the case seriously. Months passed with no significant leads, but the persistence of Shannon's family would soon lead to a discovery that would change everything. In December 2010, Suffolk County Police Officer John Malia was conducting a training exercise with his cadaver dog along Ocean Parkway, a desolate stretch of road near Gilgo Beach. The area was remote, lined with dense brush and brambles, and it was here that Malia's dog alerted to a scent. Following the dog's lead, Malia discovered a skeleton wrapped in disintegrating burlap, hidden among the vegetation. The remains were later identified as Melissa Barthelemy, a 24-year-old sex worker from the Bronx who had gone missing in July 2009. The discovery was shocking, but it was only the beginning. Over the next few days, police intensified their search along Ocean Parkway, combing the area for clues about Shannon or other missing persons. To their horror, they found 3 more sets of remains within a quarter mile of Melissa's body. These were the bodies of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, 25, who disappeared in July 2007, Megan Waterman, 22, who vanished in June 2010, and Amber Lynn Costello, 27, who went missing in September 2010. All 4 women were sex workers who had advertised their services online, primarily through Craigslist. They became known as the Gilgo Four, and their bodies were found bound in camouflage burlap, suggesting a methodical and deliberate killer. The discoveries sent shockwaves through Long Island and beyond. The idea of a serial killer operating in such close proximity to New York City was terrifying, and the case quickly drew national attention. Media outlets descended on Gilgo Beach, and residents of the quiet coastal communities began locking their doors at night. The police, under pressure to solve the case, expanded their search, hoping to find Shannon Gilbert or other clues. In March and April 2011, 6 more sets of remains were found in Suffolk and Nassau counties, bringing the total to 11 victims. These included an unidentified female toddler, an unidentified person of Asian descent, and Valerie Mack, whose partial remains had been found in Manaville in 2000. The additional remains suggested that the killer's spree might span decades and cover a wider geographic area than initially thought. The victims were a diverse group, but most shared a common thread. They were vulnerable women, often working in the sex trade, who had fallen through society's cracks. The Gilgo Four, Maureen, Melissa, Megan, and Amber, were all in their 20s, with lives marked by struggle, but also by dreams and aspirations. Maureen Brainerd Barnes was a single mother from Connecticut who turned to escorting to support her children. Melissa Barthelemy was a vibrant young woman who had moved to New York City to pursue a career in hairstyling. Megan Waterman was a mother from Maine, trying to provide for her young daughter. Amber Costello was known for her kind heart, despite battling addiction. The other victims, including Valerie Mack, Jessica Taylor, and Karen Vergata, were similarly marginalized, their disappearances often unnoticed until their remains were found. As the body count rose, so did the questions. Was this the work of a single killer, or were multiple perpetrators involved? The similarities among the Gilgo Four, their professions, the use of burlap, and their proximity along Ocean Parkway, pointed to a single culprit. But the other remains, found in different locations and states of decomposition, raised doubts. Some investigators theorized that the killer was a white male in his 20s to 40s, familiar with Long Island's South Shore and possibly with law enforcement experience, given his ability to evade detection. Others speculated that the killer had access to burlap sacks, perhaps through a job in landscaping or construction, and was methodical in his disposal methods. Early in the investigation, police uncovered disturbing details about the killer's behavior. In the case of Melissa Barthelemy, the killer had used her cell phone to make taunting calls to her family after her disappearance. In August 2009, Melissa's younger sister, Amanda, received calls from a man who claimed to have killed Melissa, describing her death in cruel detail. The calls were traced to burner phones used in crowded areas of Manhattan, making it nearly impossible to pinpoint the caller. These calls suggested a sadistic streak, a killer who derived pleasure not only from murder but from tormenting his victims' loved ones. Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole described this behavior as rare and high risk, noting that it indicated a predator who thrived on control and fear. The investigation faced significant challenges from the start. The Suffolk County Police Department was criticized for its handling of the case, particularly its initial dismissal of Shannon Gilbert's disappearance. The department was also grappling with internal issues, including allegations of corruption. In 2012, Police Chief James Burke, who oversaw the early years of the investigation, ended cooperation with the FBI, a decision that many believe hindered progress. Burke was later convicted of unrelated charges, including assaulting a suspect and orchestrating a cover-up, further tarnishing the department's reputation. The lack of FBI involvement until 2015 left the investigation in limbo, with no suspects named and few public updates. Despite these setbacks, the police pursued several leads. In January 2010, investigators released a photograph of a black leather belt found at one of the crime scenes, embossed with the initials WH or HM. Suffolk County Police Commissioner Geraldine Hart stated that the belt was handled by the killer and did not belong to any of the victims, suggesting it could be a critical clue. Witnesses also provided descriptions of a suspect seen with Amber Costello, describing him as a tall, heavy-set man driving a first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche. This description came from Dave Schaller, Amber's roommate, who had encountered the man after a violent altercation at their home. Schaller's tip was initially overlooked, but it would later prove pivotal. For years, the case remained a cold one, with no arrests and little progress. The victims' families grew frustrated, feeling that their loved ones were being forgotten because of their marginalized status. Advocacy groups, such as the Sex Workers Outreach Project, highlighted the systemic neglect of sex workers cases, with some police departments referring to such murders as NHI, no humans involved cases. The families of the Gilgo 4 and other victims organized memorials along Ocean Parkway, but even these were removed, leaving them with little to honor their loved ones. A turning point came in 2020 when a new police chief, Rodney Harrison, took over the Suffolk County Police Department. Harrison, a former NYPD detective, brought renewed energy to the case, forming a multi-agency task force that included the FBI, New York State Police, and Suffolk County Sheriff's Office. The task force focused on re-examining old evidence with modern technology, particularly DNA analysis. In May 2020, genetic genealogy helped identify the remains of Valerie Mack, a 24-year-old mother from Philadelphia who had disappeared in 2000. This breakthrough demonstrated the potential of advanced forensic techniques to crack the case. The task force's efforts paid off in March 2022, when a New York State investigator identified a name in a database. Rex Hoyerman, a 59-year-old architect from Massapequa Park, Long Island. Hoyerman fit the witness description provided by Dave Schaller, lived close to the cell tower sites linked to the burner phones, and owned a first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche at the time of the murders. Investigators began surveilling Hoyerman and his family, collecting DNA samples from discarded items, including a pizza crust he threw away in Manhattan. The DNA from the pizza crust matched a male hair found on the burlap wrapping Megan Waterman's body, providing a critical link. Further evidence mounted against Hoyerman. Cell phone records showed that burner phones used to contact the victims had pinged in locations tied to Hoyerman's home and office. Hairs believed to belong to his wife, Asa Ellerup, and daughter, Victoria Hoyerman, were found on or near 6 of the victims, suggesting possible transfer from Hoyerman's clothing or environment. Prosecutors noted that the murders occurred when Hoyerman's family was out of town, giving him the opportunity to lure victims to his home. Hoyerman was also found to have an obsessive interest in the case, conducting over 200 online searches related to the Gilgo Beach investigation, including queries like, why hasn't the Long Island serial killer been caught? On July 13, 2023, after more than a decade of investigation, Rex Heuermann was arrested in Manhattan as he left his architectural firm. The arrest was a stunning development, marking the first major breakthrough in the case. Heuermann was charged with 6 counts of murder in the deaths of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, and he was named the prime suspect in the killing of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. In January 2024, he was formally charged with Maureen's murder, and in December 2024, he faced additional charges for the murder of Valerie Mack. Heuermann pleaded not guilty to all charges, and his attorney, Michael Brown, argued that the investigation had been tainted by early mishandling and that the evidence was circumstantial. The arrest brought a flood of new evidence and public attention. Investigators searched Heuermann's home in Massapequa Park, a modest house just miles from Gilgo Beach, theorizing that he may have committed the murders there. They found items like a doll that seemed out of place, possibly a souvenir from the killings, and searched a storage unit Heuermann kept in Amityville. The task force also expanded its investigation to other unsolved cases, including murders in Las Vegas and South Carolina, where Heuermann had ties. However, no connections to these cases have been confirmed. Heuermann's life before his arrest painted a picture of a man living a double life. By day, he was a respected architect whose clients included major organizations like Catholic Charities and American Airlines. He lived with his wife and 2 children in a neighborhood described as quiet and unassuming. Neighbors were shocked to learn of his arrest, describing him as an ordinary family man. Yet, prosecutors alleged that Heuermann was a predator who targeted vulnerable women, exploiting their marginalization to evade detection. His searches for violent pornography and his use of burner phones to contact victims further supported this image of a calculated killer. As of April 2025, Heuermann remains in custody, awaiting trial. The case is far from closed, with investigators still working to connect him to the remaining unidentified victims and determine whether other killers were involved. The discovery of Shannon Gilbert's remains in December 2011, over a year after the initial finds, added complexity to the case. While police concluded her death was likely accidental, her family believes she was a victim of the same killer, and they continue to seek access to her 911 call, which remains unreleased. The Long Island serial killer case has left an indelible mark on the communities of Long Island and the families of the victims. It exposed systemic failures in how society and law enforcement treat marginalized groups, particularly sex workers, and highlighted the power of persistence in the face of adversity. The families of the Gilgo 4 and other victims have become advocates for justice, ensuring that their loved ones are remembered not as statistics but as daughters, mothers, and sisters. For the residents of Long Island, the case is a reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of suburban life. Gilgo Beach, once a place of solitude and natural beauty, is now synonymous with tragedy. Yet, the arrest of Rex Heuermann offers a glimmer of hope that justice may finally be served. As the investigation continues, the full scope of the killer's actions remains uncertain, but the resolve to uncover the truth burns brighter than ever. The story of the Long Island serial killer is one of loss, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of answers. It is a testament to the strength of those who refuse to let the victims be forgotten, and a sobering reminder that monsters can hide in plain sight, even in the most ordinary of places. In the quiet, semi-rural suburb of Mornington, Victoria, Australia, where the salty breeze from the nearby coast mingled with the calm of suburban life, the Sharp family appeared to live an unremarkable existence. John Miles Sharp, a reserved man with a penchant for routine, and his New Zealand-born wife, Anna Marie Kemp, had built a life together in this coastal town south of Melbourne. Their 20-month-old daughter, Gracie Louise Sharp, was the center of their world, a toddler with a bright smile despite the challenges she faced from birth. But beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary family, a darkness was brewing. one that would erupt in March 2004, shattering the tranquility of Mornington and leaving a community in disbelief. The Sharp family murders, as they would come to be known, were not just a tragedy but a chilling tale of betrayal, deception, and unimaginable violence committed by a man who, to the outside world, seemed incapable of such horrors. John Miles Sharp was born on February 28, 1967, in Mornington, a town known for its picturesque beaches and close-knit community. Raised by shopkeepers Valerie and Miles Sharp, John was the youngest of 6 children, with 4 older sisters and a younger brother. His childhood was largely unremarkable, though those who knew him described him as socially awkward, a boy who struggled to connect with others and leaned heavily on his parents for support. He was not the type to stand out, blending into the background with his quiet demeanor and lack of ambition. School was a challenge for John. He completed year 12 but failed his exams, a setback that did little to boost his confidence. Despite his struggles, he found work at the State Bank and later at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, where his life would take a pivotal turn. It was at the Commonwealth Bank in the early 1990s that John met Anna Marie Kemp, a warm and determined woman born on September 27, 1962, in New Zealand. Anna had moved to Melbourne as an adult, seeking new opportunities, and her job as a bank teller brought her into John's orbit. For years older than John, Anna was drawn to his quiet nature, perhaps seeing stability in his unassuming presence. Their relationship moved quickly, and by October 1994, they were married, settling into life on the Mornington Peninsula. Anna's family, however, had reservations. After the honeymoon, Anna confided in her mother that she felt she had made a mistake, describing the marriage as lacking passion or love. Yet, determined to make it work, she pushed forward, hoping a family would bring them closer. For years, the couple lived a nomadic life, moving between rentals around the Mornington Peninsula. John left banking to become a self-employed conveyancer, a job that allowed him flexibility but little financial security. Anna, meanwhile, poured her energy into their marriage, striving to create a stable home. In August 2002, their daughter, Gracie Louise Sharp, was born, bringing joy but also new challenges. Gracie was diagnosed with hip dysplasia, a condition where the hip socket fails to fully support the thigh bone, requiring her to wear a corrective harness for the first 3 months of her life. The harness was uncomfortable, and Gracie cried often, her sleep disrupted by pain. Even after the harness was removed, she struggled with feeding and sleeping, her distress a constant presence in the Sharp household. The strain of caring for Gracie began to wear on John and Anna's marriage. Anna sought professional help, attending respite programs to establish better sleep patterns for Gracie and alleviate her own anxiety. John, however, seemed less equipped to handle the demands of parenthood. Described as emotionally stunted, he struggled to cope with stress, retreating into himself rather than confronting challenges. Gracie's condition, while not life-threatening, was a source of tension, and John's resentment began to fester. He had never been enthusiastic about fatherhood, and the idea of expanding their family was far from his mind. So, when Anna announced in November 2003 that she was pregnant with their second child, John's reaction was not one of joy but of dread. The news of Anna's pregnancy came as a shock to John, who later told police he felt one child was burden enough. At 15 months old, Gracie was still a handful, and the prospect of another baby overwhelmed him. Around this time, John's behavior took a peculiar turn. In early 2003, he visited Sport Philip Marine, a local shop in Mornington, and purchased a high-powered spear gun and an additional spear. It was an odd choice. Rollers for John, who had never shown an interest in spearfishing, was an enigma. He began practicing with the spear gun in the backyard of their rental home, familiarizing himself with its operation. The purchase raised no immediate red flags, but in hindsight, it was a chilling precursor to the horrors to come. Later that year, the Sharps purchased a modest home at 116 Prince Street in Mornington, hoping it would mark a fresh start. The house was a fixer-upper, But Anna was optimistic, envisioning a stable future for their growing family. To the outside world, the Sharps appeared to be a typical couple navigating the challenges of parenthood. On March 21, 2004, they attended a nephew's birthday party, where guests noticed no overt tension between them. John and Anna seemed to be in good spirits, laughing and chatting with family. But beneath this facade, John's resentment was reaching a boiling point. 2 days later, on March 23, 2004, the Sharp household descended into chaos. That evening, John and Anna argued, though the specifics of their disagreement remain unclear. Between 9 o'clock and 10 p.m., Anna went to bed, exhausted from the day and her pregnancy. John, however, could not sleep. He lay beside her, brooding over their argument and the state of their marriage. His mind churned with feelings of entrapment, resentment toward Anna's perceived control, and dread about the unborn child. In a moment of cold calculation, John made a decision that would change everything. He slipped out of bed and retrieved the spear gun from the garage, where it had been stored since his backyard practice sessions. Returning to the bedroom, he stood over Anna, who was fast asleep, unaware of the danger looming above her. With the spear gun loaded, John aimed at her left temple and fired from just a few centimeters away. The spear pierced her skull, but Anna was still alive, her breathing shallow. Unfazed, John reloaded and fired a second spear into her head, this time ensuring her death. He covered her body with towels, as if to shield himself from the reality of what he had done, and went downstairs to sleep on the sofa bed, leaving Anna's lifeless body in their shared bedroom. The next morning, John awoke to the grim reality of his actions. He attempted to remove the spears from Anna's head but found them lodged too deeply, managing only to unscrew the shafts from the heads. Remarkably, he carried on with his day as if nothing had happened. He took Gracie to her childcare center, dropped her off, and later picked her up, all while Anna's body remained in the house. When a TV serviceman arrived to fix their television, John turned him away, claiming it was a bad time, ensuring no one would discover the crime. That evening, under the cover of darkness, he dug a shallow grave in the backyard and buried Anna, her unborn child still within her. In the days that followed, John crafted a web of lies to cover his tracks. He told the staff at Gracie's child care center that Anna had left him, spinning a tale of abandonment. He called Anna's mother in New Zealand, claiming Anna had run off with another man and would return soon to collect Gracie. To those who asked, he maintained that Anna's whereabouts were unknown, playing the part of a confused and concerned husband. But his deception went further. Sometime after Anna's murder, John returned to Sport Phillip Marine, this time with Gracie in tow, and purchased another spear for the spear gun, an act later described in court as one of unspeakable callousness. On March 27, 2004, 4 days after killing Anna, John turned his attention to Gracie. That evening, he put his daughter to bed in her cot, her small frame tucked under blankets. To steel himself for what he was about to do, John drank several glasses of whiskey and coke, later claiming it was to numb his senses. He retrieved the spear gun from the garage, loaded it with the newly purchased spear, and entered Gracie's room. Standing over her cot, he fired the spear into her head, the force penetrating her tiny skull. Gracie, still alive, began to wail in agony. John, undeterred, retrieved the 2 spear shafts he had removed from Anna's head and fired them into Gracie's head. When she still showed signs of life, he withdrew 1 spear and fired it again, finally ending her suffering. The brutality of Gracie's murder was staggering. John later claimed he lost the plot, overwhelmed by the chaos of his actions and the weight of his unhappy marriage. Yet his actions were methodical, calculated, and devoid of remorse. The following morning, he removed the spears from Gracie's head, wrapped her body in garbage bags and a tarpaulin, and drove to the Mornington Refuse transfer station. There, he dumped her body among the household waste, along with the spear gun, the spears, and some of Gracie's clothes and toys. On March 29th, he visited a Bunnings warehouse in Frankston, purchasing duct tape, 2 tarpaulins, and an electric chainsaw. The next day, he exhumed Anna's body from the backyard, dismembered her into 3 pieces with the chainsaw, and disposed of her remains in blue rubbish bags at the same refuse station. For weeks, John maintained his facade, appearing on television to plead for information about his missing wife and daughter. He faced cameras with feigned distress, his voice trembling as he asked for Anna and Gracie to come home. Detective Narelle Fraser, a seasoned investigator with the Victoria Police, watched these interviews with unease. Her gut instinct told her something was off. John's tears seemed rehearsed, his story too convenient. As police began to investigate, they uncovered inconsistencies. Anna's family reported that she had no history of infidelity or abandonment, and her sudden disappearance was out of character. The purchase of the spear gun, the additional spears, and the chainsaw raised red flags. By June 22, 2004, the pressure was mounting. Police arrested John and interviewed him twice that day. In the first interview, he stuck to his story, denying any knowledge of Anna or Gracie's whereabouts. But after speaking with his family, who urged him to tell the truth, John's resolve crumbled. In the second interview, he confessed to the murders, detailing the events with a chilling lack of emotion. He described killing Anna because she was controlling and moody, claiming their marriage was unhappy. As for Gracie, he said he acted in a moment of madness, unable to cope with the prospect of raising her alone. Detective Fraser, listening to the confession, was struck by John's detachment, particularly when he spoke of killing Gracie, a child he was meant to protect. The investigation that followed was grueling. Police descended on the Rockley Stone Waste Management Facility in Toorong, 60 kilometers south of Melbourne, to search for Anna and Gracie's remains. Hundreds of officers, clad in biohazard suits to protect against asbestos-ridden debris, sifted through mounds of rubbish. The scene was apocalyptic, a stark contrast to the serene Mornington suburb where the crimes occurred. Eventually, they recovered Anna's dismembered remains, but Gracie's body was never found, likely lost to the vast expanse of the landfill. John Sharp pleaded guilty to both murders, sparing the families a protracted trial. In 2005, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive terms of life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 33 years. He will be eligible for parole in 2037, when he is 70 years old. The sentencing hearing was emotionally charged, with Anna's family delivering victim impact statements that laid bare their grief. Anna's brother spoke of her kindness and dedication, while her mother wept for the daughter and granddaughter stolen from them. The judge condemned John's actions as heinous, noting the premeditation and cruelty involved, particularly in Gracie's murder. The Sharp family murders left an indelible mark on Mornington and beyond. For Detective Narelle Fraser, the case was one she could never shake. The image of John, a man who seemed so ordinary, committing such atrocities haunted her. The community grappled with the betrayal, struggling to reconcile the doting husband and father with the Mornington monster, as the media dubbed him. Speculation arose about John's motives. Some suggested he killed Anna after she discovered he was abusing Gracie, but no evidence supported this claim. Others pointed to his low emotional intelligence and inability to handle stress, painting a picture of a man undone by his own inadequacies. Anna Marie Kemp was remembered as a loving mother and a woman who deserved better. Her life was cut short at 41, her unborn child never given a chance to live. Gracie, just 20 months old, was an innocent caught in her father's descent into darkness. Their deaths were not just a loss but a violation of trust, a reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places. The house at 116 Prince Street stood as a silent witness to the tragedy, its walls holding secrets no one could have imagined. As the years passed, the Sharp family murders became a cautionary tale, a story told and retold in true crime circles. Podcasts, articles, and documentaries dissected the case, each attempting to understand how a man could turn on his own family with such ferocity. For those who knew Anna and Gracie, the pain never fully faded. Anniversaries of their deaths brought fresh waves of grief, and the absence of Gracie's remains left a void that could not be filled. John Sharp, now incarcerated, remains a figure of revulsion, his name synonymous with betrayal. In the end, the Sharp family murders were more than a crime. They were a stark exploration of human frailty. They forced a reckoning with uncomfortable truths, that love can curdle into resentment, that a quiet demeanor can mask a capacity for violence, and that the people we trust most can become our greatest betrayers. For Mornington, the scars of 2004 linger, a reminder of a time when the illusion of safety was shattered and 2 lives were extinguished in the night. In the quiet, rural village of Hutkow, Poland, nestled in the southeastern corner of the country, life moved at a gentle pace. The rolling fields and modest homes painted a picture of simplicity, where neighbors knew each other by name and secrets were hard to keep. But in the late summer of 2018, this tranquil community would be shaken by a discovery so bizarre and unsettling that it would leave residents, investigators, and true crime enthusiasts grappling with questions that remain unanswered to this day. At the heart of this enigma was Mateosh Kaweki, a 30-year-old man whose life seemed full of promise, until it ended in a way no one could have predicted. Mateosh Kaweki was born in 1988 in Hutkow, a small village near the city of Zamość in Poland's Lublin voivodeship. Like many young men from rural Poland, Mateusz sought opportunities beyond the confines of his hometown. For 5 years, he had been working as a construction worker in Hanover, Germany, a city some 600 miles from Hutkow. He shared an apartment with his father, who also worked in Hanover, and the two maintained a close bond despite the distance from their family back home. Mateusz was described by those who knew him as hardworking, dependable, and deeply devoted to his loved ones. His life, though split between 2 countries, seemed stable and purposeful. At the center of Mateusz's world was his fiancée, Agatha Kaweka, who lived in Lipia Góra, a village in northwestern Poland, over 400 miles from Hutkow. The couple maintained a long-distance relationship, a testament to their commitment despite the challenges of geography. In early 2018, their bond grew even stronger with the news that Agatha was pregnant with their first child, a daughter they would name Agnieszka. As Agatha's due date approached, Mateusz's excitement was palpable. He spoke often of his eagerness to be there for the birth, to hold his newborn daughter, and to start building a family with the woman he loved. On the evening of March 28, 2018, Mateusz's life took a fateful turn. It was around 11:30 p.m. when he climbed into his 1998 BMW 525, a reliable if aging car, and set out from Hanover for the 402-mile journey to Lipia Góra. Agatha was nearing the end of her pregnancy, and Mateusz was determined to be by her side for the birth. The drive was expected to take about 9 hours, factoring in rest stops and the border crossing between Germany and Poland. He told his father he would call when he arrived, and with that, he disappeared into the night, the hum of the BMW's engine fading into the distance. The next morning, March 29, 2018, came and went without word from Mateusz. Agatha, expecting his arrival, grew anxious when he didn't show up at the hospital in Lipia Góra. She tried calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Concerned, she contacted Mateusz's father in Hanover, who was equally puzzled. Mateusz was not the type to vanish without a word, especially not on such an important occasion. As hours turned into days, the family's worry deepened. They reached out to friends, co-workers, and anyone who might have heard from him, but no one had any information. Mateusz, along with his BMW, had seemingly vanished without a trace. By early April, the Kaweki family could no longer wait for answers. They reported Mateusz missing to both the German and Polish authorities, hoping for a coordinated effort to locate him. However, their hopes were quickly dashed by bureaucratic red tape. The German police, citing that Mateusz had disappeared in Poland, refused to take on the case, insisting it was the responsibility of the Polish authorities. The Polish police, meanwhile, faced their own limitations. They attempted to track Mateusz's cell phone, which his family noted had been active for a couple of days after his disappearance, but they were unable to do so because Mateusz used a German SIM card. The German police, in turn, claimed they couldn't trace the phone since the disappearance occurred in Poland. This jurisdictional stalemate left the family feeling abandoned by the very systems meant to help them. Frustrated and desperate, the Kaweki family took matters into their own hands. They began their own investigation, retracing Mateusz's intended route from Hanover to Lipia Gora. They drove along highways and side roads, stopping at gas stations to speak with attendants and requesting access to surveillance footage. They visited markets in towns near the German-Polish border, distributing posters with Mateusz's photo and pleading for information. Despite their exhaustive efforts, they found no sign of Mateusz or his car. It was as if he had been erased from existence. Months passed with no breakthroughs. The family's grief was compounded by the lack of progress in the official investigation. Mateusz's aunt, who also lived in Hanover, was particularly vocal. She took to Facebook, posting cryptic and emotional messages about her nephew's disappearance. She claimed to have been the first to report Mateusz missing to his German employer and insisted that he had taken his own life, though she offered no concrete evidence to support this claim. Her posts stirred confusion and frustration among family members, who were still clinging to hope that Mateusz was alive. Then, on September 12, 2018, a chilling discovery brought the mystery into sharp focus. In Hutkow, a neighbor approached Mateusz's mother with a concern. For weeks, a foul odor had been emanating from the family's barn, a sturdy structure used for storage and occasionally visited by family members. The neighbor assumed it was a dead animal, perhaps a rat or a stray cat, and offered to investigate. Mateusz's mother, weary from months of uncertainty, agreed. The neighbor climbed into the barn's loft, a mezzanine-like area visible from the ground floor, expecting to find something mundane. Instead, he was met with a sight that would haunt him for years. There, in the dim light of the loft, lay a pile of clothes that, upon closer inspection, was no pile at all. It was a human body or what was left of it. The remains were severely decomposed, the head severed from the torso, and one foot detached, still encased in a shoe. The corpse was surrounded by Mateusz's belongings: a backpack, his phone, and his wallet. 2 rope nooses hung ominously from the barn's rafters, one positioned closer to the body than the other. Most disturbingly, several of Mateusz's teeth were found stuck to his clothes, held in place by what appeared to be dried blood. The scene was grotesque, perplexing, and utterly heartbreaking. The neighbor immediately alerted the authorities, and the barn was cordoned off as a crime scene. DNA testing confirmed the remains belonged to Mateosh Kaweki. The discovery sent shockwaves through the family and the tight-knit Hutkow community. How had Mateosh's body ended up in his family's barn, just steps from his childhood home, when he was supposed to be in Lipia Gora? Why had no one noticed the smell or the body earlier, given that the family had used the barn throughout the summer? And what had happened to his car, which was still missing? The Polish police and the public prosecutor's office quickly concluded that Mateusz's death was a suicide. They pointed to the presence of the nooses and the lack of foreign DNA on Mateusz's belongings as evidence that no one else was involved. They suggested that Mateusz had purchased a rope at a German hardware store, center shop, and cited CCTV footage showing him at the store, though this footage was never made public. The authorities theorized that Mateusz, perhaps overwhelmed by personal struggles, had driven to Hutkow instead of Lipia Gora, entered the family barn, and taken his own life. The decapitation and severed foot, they argued, were the result of advanced decomposition, exacerbated by the summer heat in the unventilated barn. To the Kaweki family, This explanation was not only unsatisfactory but insulting. They pointed to numerous inconsistencies and oversights in the investigation. For one, the family had been in and out of the barn multiple times during the summer, yet no one had noticed a body or smelled anything unusual until July, when the odor finally became unbearable. Mateosh's cousin, Edita Dabska, was adamant. "It is very strange because we have been to this barn many times during this time. The door was wide open and nobody noticed anything. The prosecutor claims that he was hanging there, but we do not think so because we simply did not see him there." The family's skepticism was further fueled by a shocking discovery. For days after the police had supposedly cleared the crime scene, family members found Mateosh's shoe in the barn, with his severed foot still inside. This glaring oversight suggested that the police had not even thoroughly searched the area. The condition of Mateosh's body raised more questions than answers. The knocked-out teeth, stuck to his clothes with blood, suggested trauma, not the natural process of decomposition. The presence of 2 nooses was equally baffling. Why would someone attempting suicide prepare 2 ropes? Some speculated that Mateosh had used one noose as leverage to tie the other, but this theory seemed convoluted and unconvincing. The absence of his car was another sticking point. If Mateosh had driven to Hutkau to end his life, where was the BMW? The keys were not found in the barn, and despite extensive searches, the vehicle was never located. Theories abounded. Had the car been stolen, disposed of in a body of water, or dismantled in a chop shop? The family's distrust of the official narrative was compounded by the authorities' refusal to investigate further. Despite appeals, the police maintained that there was no evidence of foul play and closed the case in 2021. The lack of transparency, key pieces of evidence, like the CCTV footage and autopsy reports, were never released to the public, only deepened the family's frustration. They believed Mateosh had been murdered and that the scene in the barn was staged to look like a suicide. But if that was the case, who was responsible? And how had they managed to infiltrate a small village like Hutkau without arousing suspicion? Speculation about Mateosh's death ran rampant, both within the family and among true crime communities online. Some theorized that Mateosh had been involved in something illicit, perhaps drug trafficking, given his frequent travel between Germany and Poland. Could he have crossed paths with dangerous individuals who killed him and disposed of his car to cover their tracks? Others wondered if the killer was someone closer to home, perhaps known to the family, who knew the barn would be an inconspicuous place to hide a body. The fact that the barn was on family property, yet went unnoticed for months, led some to question whether the family itself was hiding something, a notion they vehemently denied. One particularly unsettling detail was Mateosh's phone. His father recalled speaking to him on March 28th, when Mateosh mentioned a traffic delay near Szczecin, a city in northwestern Poland. Yet the Polish police later claimed that Mateosh's phone never connected to a Polish network, suggesting he may not have crossed the border. If true, this raised the possibility that Mateosh had never left Germany, or that he had been lured to Hutkau under false pretenses. The phone's activity in the days following his disappearance added another layer of mystery. Who was using it and why had it suddenly gone silent? Mateosh's aunt in Hanover continued to assert that he had committed suicide, pointing to the rope purchase and her conversations with German authorities. Her insistence clashed with the rest of the family's belief in foul play, creating tension and further muddying the waters. Some online sleuths speculated that Mateosh may have been struggling with depression or personal issues that he kept hidden, leading him to take his own life in a place tied to his childhood memories. But this theory struggled to explain the missing car, the knocked-out teeth, and the family's adamant claims that Mateosh was excited about his future as a father. The barn itself became a focal point of the mystery. It was not a hidden or abandoned structure, but a working part of the family's property, visible and accessible. The idea that a decomposing body could go unnoticed for 6 months strained credulity, especially given the overpowering smell of decay. Some suggested that Mateosh's body had been placed in the barn later, perhaps moved from another location to stage a suicide. But this theory, too, had holes. Moving a body would have left traces, and the police found no evidence of third-party involvement. As the years passed, the case of Mateosh Kaweki faded from public view, overshadowed by other mysteries and the relentless pace of news cycles. In Hutkow, however, the pain remained fresh. Agatha gave birth to Agnieszka without Mateusz by her side, and the family mourned not only his loss but the lack of closure. They continued to push for answers, hiring private investigators and appealing to the media, but their efforts yielded little. The barn, once a symbol of rural life, became a grim reminder of an unsolved tragedy. True crime enthusiasts on platforms like Reddit and podcasts like Thrilogy and Wicked and Grim have kept Mateusz's story alive, dissecting every detail and proposing theories that range from plausible to outlandish. Some believe the police's suicide ruling was a convenient way to close a complex case, pointing to the shoddy investigation as evidence of incompetence or worse. Others argue that the truth lies somewhere in between. Perhaps Mateusz was struggling with issues no one knew about, but something or someone interrupted his plans, leading to a violent end. The absence of Mateusz's car remains one of the case's most enduring mysteries. A 1998 BMW 525 is not an inconspicuous vehicle, and its disappearance suggests deliberate action, whether by Mateusz or someone else. The car could hold the key to unraveling what happened that night in March 2018, but without it, the puzzle remains incomplete. Similarly, the two nooses, the severed foot, and the bloody teeth are pieces of a jigsaw that don't quite fit, each one hinting at a story that defies easy explanation. In the end, the death of Mateosh Kaweki is a haunting reminder of how quickly a life can be reduced to a series of unanswered questions. Was he a victim of foul play, betrayed by someone he trusted, or caught in a web of unseen dangers? Or did he, in a moment of despair, choose to end his life in a place that held deep personal meaning? The truth, like Mateusz's car, remains elusive, hidden somewhere in the shadows of that fateful journey. For the Kaweki family, the fight for justice continues. They refuse to accept the official narrative, holding fast to the belief that Mateusz deserved better, both in life and in death. In Hutkow, the barn still stands, its weathered walls bearing silent witness to a mystery that may never be solved. And somewhere, perhaps submerged in a lake, stripped for parts, or abandoned in a forgotten corner, the BMW 525 waits, a final clue to a story that refuses to end. In the early morning hours of August 30th, 2013, a silver Toyota Highlander lay overturned in a ravine near Castaic Lake, California, its rear window shattered, airbags deployed, and belongings scattered. The vehicle belonged to Bryce Laspiza, a 19-year-old college student who had been driving from Sierra College in Rockland to his parents' home in Laguna Niguel, a journey of about 400 miles. His phone, wallet, laptop, and duffel bag were still inside the car, but Bryce was nowhere to be found. The discovery of the wrecked SUV marked the beginning of one of the most perplexing missing person cases in modern true crime, a mystery that has baffled investigators, captivated the public, and left a family grappling with unanswered questions for over a decade. What happened to Bryce Laspiza, and why did a seemingly ordinary trip home end in such an enigmatic disappearance? Bryce David Laspiza was born on April 30th, 1994, to Michael and Karen Laspiza in the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois. An only child, Bryce grew up in a tight-knit family, surrounded by love and support. Described as charismatic, friendly, and artistically gifted, he had a knack for making people feel at ease. His striking red hair, green eyes, and warm smile made him stand out, and his passion for art defined much of his identity. Bryce was particularly drawn to graphic and industrial design, a field that allowed him to channel his creativity. He graduated from Naperville Central High School in 2012, and shortly afterward, the Laspiza family relocated to Laguna Niguel, California, following his parents' retirement. The move marked a new chapter for Bryce, who enrolled at Sierra College in Rocklin, a small town north of Sacramento, to pursue his artistic ambitions. At Sierra College, Bryce seemed to thrive. His freshman year was marked by academic success and a budding social life. He formed a close relationship with Kim Sly, a fellow student who became his girlfriend, and made friends like Sean Dixon, who would later become his roommate. Bryce's cheerful demeanor and artistic talent earned him admiration among peers, and he maintained regular contact with his parents, often calling to share updates about his classes or life at college. To those who knew him, Bryce appeared to be a typical 19-year-old navigating the transition from adolescence to adulthood, with a promising future ahead. However, Bryce's life wasn't without its challenges. During high school, he had reportedly experimented with alcohol and marijuana, behavior that was not uncommon for a teenager testing boundaries. His parents were aware of these incidents but viewed them as typical youthful indiscretions. At Sierra College, Bryce faced a setback during his freshman year when he was kicked out of the dorms for partying-related issues, forcing him to move in with friends. Despite this, he seemed to rebound, focusing on his studies and maintaining a positive outlook. His parents, particularly his mother Karen, described him as an open book who shared his thoughts and feelings freely, making it hard to imagine that anything was seriously wrong. The events leading up to Bryce's disappearance began in late August 2013, just as he was starting his sophomore year. On August 26th, Bryce attended a speech class and a web design class, calling his mother that evening to express excitement about the new semester. The conversation, as Karen later recalled, felt perfectly normal, with no hint of distress. But those closest to Bryce noticed a shift in his behavior around this time. Kim and Sean observed that he had become quieter, sadder, and more unpredictable, a stark contrast to his usual upbeat self. Bryce had returned to Rockland 2 weeks earlier after spending the summer with his parents, and something seemed to have changed. Friends reported that Bryce's drinking had escalated significantly. He was consuming alcohol daily, a departure from his earlier, more moderate habits. When Kim confronted him about his behavior, Bryce admitted to taking Vyvanse, a prescription stimulant commonly used to treat ADHD but also abused as a study drug for its amphetamine-like effects. Vyvanse, when misused, can cause intense side effects, including paranoia, mania, and even psychosis, particularly when combined with alcohol or sleep deprivation. Bryce's admission raised alarm bells for Kim, who sensed that his behavior was spiraling out of control. On August 27th, Bryce's actions grew even more concerning. He sent a text to Kim, ending their relationship with the cryptic message, "You'd be better off without me." The breakup came out of nowhere, leaving Kim shaken. That same day, Bryce gave away personal belongings, including a pair of diamond earrings from his mother and his Xbox gaming console, to his roommate Sean. To his best friend, he sent a heartfelt message, "I love you, brother. You're the best person I've ever known in my life." These gestures, in hindsight, struck those around him as a final farewell, as if Bryce were preparing to leave his life behind. Kim, worried about Bryce's state of mind, took his car keys to prevent him from driving under the influence. She contacted Karen, expressing her concerns about Bryce's heavy drinking and drug use. Karen, however, downplayed the situation, assuring Kim that Bryce was fine and persuading her to return his keys. Bryce, in a call with his mother, insisted he was okay and ready to drive. Reluctantly, Kim complied, and on the evening of August 28th, Bryce left her apartment in Chico, telling his parents he was heading to their home in Laguna Niguel, an 8-hour drive south. What should have been a straightforward trip quickly turned into a series of inexplicable events. Bryce's parents expected him to arrive by the afternoon of August 29th, but he never showed up. Around 11 a.m. that day, Karen and Michael received a notification from their insurance company that roadside assistance had been requested for Bryce's car in Buttonwillow, a small town near Bakersfield, about 200 miles north of Laguna Niguel. Confused, Karen called Bryce, but he didn't answer. She then contacted Sean, who confirmed that Bryce hadn't returned to their apartment the previous night. Karen reached out to Castro Tire and Truck, the service station that had assisted Bryce. The owner, a man named Christian, reported that he had delivered 3 gallons of gas to a young man matching Bryce's description around 9 a.m. that morning. This meant Bryce had been driving for nearly 9.5 hours to cover a distance that should have taken 6. Where he had been or what he was doing during those extra hours remains a mystery. Concerned, Karen asked Christian to check on Bryce again. To everyone's surprise, Christian found Bryce still parked in the same spot near the Buttonwillow rest area, hours after receiving the gas. Christian approached Bryce, who appeared disaffected and unresponsive. He told Bryce that his parents were worried and urged him to get back on the road. Bryce agreed, and Christian followed him to the highway to ensure he was driving. Karen and Michael, now increasingly anxious, stayed in touch with Bryce via phone, asking for updates on his location. Bryce's responses were vague. He claimed it was too dark to see road signs and relied on his GPS, which indicated he would arrive home around 3:25 a.m. on August 30th. By 9 p.m. on August 29th, Bryce had only moved 8 miles from Buttonwillow, prompting his parents to file a missing persons report in Orange County. Police tracked his phone and located him near Buttonwillow, where officers found him sitting in his car. Bryce allowed them to search his vehicle, which revealed no drugs or alcohol. He seemed lucid and friendly, though tired, and agreed to call his mother. During their conversation, Bryce said he was repacking his car and would head home soon. Karen, relieved to hear his voice, urged him to keep driving. Around 12:30 a.m. on August 30th, Karen tried calling Bryce again, but he didn't pick up. He called her back at 1:50 a.m., saying it was too dark to see any signs. At 2:08 a.m., Bryce spoke to his mother for the last time, telling her he was too tired to continue driving and planned to pull over to sleep in a residential area off Interstate 5 in the Sierra Pelona Mountains. Karen agreed, expecting him to resume his journey in the morning. "I'll see you tomorrow," she told him, unaware that those would be their final words. Security footage later captured Bryce's Toyota Highlander pulling off the highway onto an access road near Castaic Lake at 2:15 a.m. What happened next is unclear, but at 5:30 a.m., a passerby reported a vehicle overturned in a ravine off Lake Hughes Road, just a short distance from Castaic Lake. California Highway Patrol officers arrived to find Bryce's SUV on its side at the bottom of a 15-foot embankment, its rear window kicked out and his belongings intact. His duffel bag was found outside the car, but his ID was missing. Investigators determined that the car had been intentionally accelerated toward the cliff, suggesting Bryce may have driven off the road deliberately. The cliff's edge, viewed at night, could have appeared closer to the water, potentially misleading a disoriented driver. The discovery of Bryce's car triggered an extensive search. Helicopters, drones, divers, and search and rescue teams scoured Castaic Lake and the surrounding wooded area. Sniffer dogs traced Bryce's scent from the crash site to a nearby gas station, but no witnesses reported seeing him there. Despite weeks of searching, no trace of Bryce was found. No body, no clothing, no footprints. The lack of physical evidence left investigators stumped, and the case quickly grew cold. Bryce's disappearance sparked a flurry of theories. Some speculated that he had suffered a psychotic episode, possibly triggered by Vyvanse abuse, alcohol, or sleep deprivation. Users on forums like Reddit shared personal experiences with Vyvanse, describing how misuse could lead to paranoia, hallucinations, or even temporary blindness, raising the possibility that Bryce experienced a mental break that led to erratic behavior. Others believed he may have committed suicide, pointing to his cryptic messages and the intentional nature of the crash. However, the absence of a body made this theory difficult to confirm, as Castaic Lake and the surrounding area were thoroughly searched. Another theory suggested Bryce had chosen to disappear voluntarily, perhaps to escape a strained relationship with his parents or the pressures of his life. Some online accounts, including a Reddit post from 2021, claimed Bryce was not an only child and that his father had a daughter from a previous marriage who had been mistreated by Karen, leading to her estrangement from the family. These claims, while unverified by major outlets, fueled speculation that Bryce's relationship with his parents was more complicated than they let on. His decision to give away prized possessions and his vague responses during phone calls supported the idea that he might have been planning to start anew under a different identity. Foul play was also considered, though less likely. The absence of blood or signs of a struggle at the crash site, combined with the presence of Bryce's belongings, suggested he had left the scene on his own. Some wondered if he had been chased or abducted after the crash, but no evidence supported this. Reports of sightings in Santa Clarita's homeless community surfaced over the years, with some claiming to have seen a red-haired man resembling Bryce, but none were confirmed. The Laspiza family was devastated by Bryce's disappearance. Karen and Michael became vocal advocates, working with law enforcement and the media to keep the case alive. They maintained the Find Bryce Laspiza Facebook page, posting updates and encouraging acts of kindness in Bryce's name. Vigils were held, and tip lines were established, but leads dwindled over time. A burned body found near Castaic Lake in September 2013 was ruled out as Bryce, as was a skull discovered along Templin Highway in 2017. Advances in forensic science and sonar searches of the lake in later years yielded no new clues. The emotional toll on the Laspizas was immense. Karen and Michael wore bracelets inscribed with FindBryce.com, a constant reminder of their missing son. They spoke openly about their grief, describing the agony of living without answers. Every day, a loved one goes missing. They wrote on Facebook in 2023, "We grieve, while having hope for a miracle that Bryce will be found." Friends and former classmates also rallied around the cause, sharing memories and urging the public to stay vigilant. The case drew widespread attention, featured on podcasts like And Then They Were Gone, YouTube channels like Kendall Rae's, and TV shows like Disappeared. True crime enthusiasts dissected every detail, from Bryce's behavior to the timeline of his journey. Some criticized Karen and Michael for not driving to Buttonwillow to check on Bryce themselves, arguing that their inaction may have missed a critical window to intervene. Others defended the couple, noting that they had no reason to suspect Bryce was in immediate danger based on his assurances and police reports. As of April 2025, Bryce Laspiza remains missing, and the case is still open with the Santa Clarita Sheriff's Station. He would be 30 years old, potentially unrecognizable from the age-progressed images circulated by authorities. His physical description at the time of his disappearance included a height of 5 feet 11 inches, a weight of 170 pounds, red hair, green eyes, and a distinctive tattoo of a Taurus bull head with his birthday in Roman numerals on his upper left arm. His ears were pierced, and he was last seen wearing a blue and white checkered shirt, white cargo shorts, and size 12 white and red Nike sneakers. The mystery of Bryce Laspiza's disappearance endures as a haunting reminder of how quickly a life can change. Was he a young man overwhelmed by internal struggles, driven to a desperate act by substances or mental health issues? Did he orchestrate his own escape, seeking freedom from a life he no longer wanted? Or did an unforeseen encounter seal his fate? The answers remain elusive, locked in the silent expanse of Castaic's rugged terrain, or hidden in the choices of a 19-year-old whose final moments are known only to him. For now, his parents hold on to hope, the public keeps his story alive, and the question lingers: where is Bryce Laspiza? In the early morning light of January 24, 2006, the bustling city of Orlando, Florida, was just beginning to stir. The sun crept over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the sprawling theme parks and vibrant neighborhoods that defined the area. For 24-year-old Jennifer Kess, it was supposed to be another ordinary day. A successful finance manager with a bright future, Jennifer had built a life filled with promise, surrounded by a loving family, a devoted boyfriend, and a tight-knit circle of friends. But that morning, as the world around her awakened, Jennifer vanished without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that would haunt her loved ones and captivate true crime enthusiasts for nearly 2 decades. Her disappearance would unravel a complex web of clues, theories, and unanswered questions, transforming a routine day into a chilling enigma that remains unsolved to this day. Jennifer Kess was born on May 20th, 1981, in New Jersey to parents Drew and Joyce Kess. The family later relocated to Tampa, Florida, where Jennifer and her younger brother, Logan, grew up in a close-knit household. From a young age, Jennifer was a beacon of light, her infectious smile and vibrant personality drawing people to her. Her bright blue eyes sparkled with determination, and her warm demeanor made her a natural at forging connections. She was intelligent, driven, and fiercely independent, qualities that would propel her toward success early in life. Her parents instilled in her a strong sense of personal safety, a lesson rooted in a traumatic experience from their past. Years earlier, when the Kesses lived in New Jersey, Drew and Joyce had been robbed at gunpoint, an event that left an indelible mark on the family. They taught Jennifer and Logan to be vigilant, to lock doors, and to trust their instincts, a foundation that Jennifer carried with her as she navigated the world. Jennifer's academic journey took her to Vivian Gaither High School in Tampa, where she excelled both academically and socially. After graduating, she enrolled at the University of Central Florida in Orlando, a city synonymous with family-friendly attractions like Walt Disney World and Universal Studios. At UCF, Jennifer joined the Alpha Delta Pi sorority, forming lifelong friendships and immersing herself in campus life. She pursued a degree in finance, graduating with honors in 2003. Her ambition and work ethic caught the attention of employers, and after turning down multiple job offers, she accepted a position as a finance manager at Central Florida Investments Timeshare Company, also known as Westgate Resorts, in Ocoee, Florida. At just 24, Jennifer was thriving professionally, earning promotions twice within her first year and becoming one of the youngest managers in the company's history. Beyond her career, Jennifer's personal life was equally fulfilling. She had recently purchased her first home, a condominium at the Mosaic at Millennia Complex in Orlando, a gated community that offered a sense of security. The complex was undergoing a conversion from apartments to condos, and construction workers were a common sight, hammering away at unfinished units. The area was in transition, a mix of revitalization and rough edges, but Jennifer loved its proximity to the upscale mall at Millennia, where she indulged her passion for shopping. Her condo was a symbol of her independence, a place where she could build her future. She was also in a loving relationship with her boyfriend, Rob Allen, who lived 3 hours away in Fort Lauderdale. Despite the distance, their connection was strong, and they shared a deep bond. The weekend before her disappearance, Jennifer and Rob had returned from a romantic getaway in St. Croix, a much-needed escape from their busy lives. On Sunday, January 22, 2006, they flew back to Florida, and Jennifer spent the night at Rob's place in Fort Lauderdale. The next day, she drove the 3 hours to Orlando, arriving at her office by 8 a.m. She worked a full day, leaving around 6 p.m. to head home to her condo. That evening, she spoke on the phone with her parents around 6 p.m., sharing details of her trip and catching up as she always did. Later, around 10 p.m., she called Rob, and they exchanged goodnights, a routine conversation that would later take on heartbreaking significance. It was the last time anyone would hear from her. The morning of January 24th began like any other. Jennifer's condo was tidy, with signs that she had prepared for the day ahead. A damp towel hung near the shower, her pajamas were strewn on the floor, and her hair tools sat on the bathroom counter. She had laid out clothes on her bed, suggesting she'd tried on a few outfits before deciding what to wear to work. Her keys, cell phone, purse, iPod, and briefcase were gone, indicating she had left for the office as usual. But when 11 a.m. rolled around and Jennifer hadn't shown up at work, her boss grew concerned. Jennifer was punctual and reliable, and missing work without notice was unthinkable. He called her parents, alerting them to her absence. Drew and Joyce Kess, alarmed by the news, tried calling Jennifer's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. They contacted her brother, Logan, who hadn't heard from her either. Panic set in as they reached out to hospitals and police stations, but there was no sign of Jennifer. They called the manager at Mosaic at Millenia, who checked her condo and reported that everything appeared undisturbed, except for one glaring detail. Jennifer's black 2006 Chevy Malibu was missing from the parking lot. Drew and Joyce made the 2-hour drive from Tampa to Orlando, their hearts pounding with dread. When they arrived at Jennifer's condo, they confirmed the manager's observations. The apartment was locked, her suitcase from the St. Croix trip sat unpacked in the living room, and there were no signs of a struggle. It was as if Jennifer had simply stepped out and never returned. The Orlando Police Department was notified, but the initial response left the Kesses frustrated. An officer briefly inspected the condo, glanced around for less than a minute, and suggested that Jennifer had likely had a fight with her boyfriend and would return soon. The dismissive attitude infuriated Drew and Joyce, who knew their daughter would never disappear without a word. As the hours passed, the gravity of the situation became undeniable. Friends and family rallied together, distributing flyers with Jennifer's photo and organizing search parties. The police escalated their efforts, deploying officers on foot, horseback, boats, helicopters, cars, and ATVs to scour the area. But Jennifer was nowhere to be found. 2 days later, on January 26th, a breakthrough emerged. Jennifer's Chevy Malibu was discovered abandoned at an apartment complex called Huntington on the Green, about a mile from her condo in a higher crime area. The car was locked, and inside were some of Jennifer's personal items, including a DVD player and a change of clothes. Notably absent were her purse, wallet, cell phones. She carried 2, briefcase, and car keys. Surveillance footage from the complex provided the most tantalizing clue yet. At approximately noon on January 24th, an unidentified person was captured on camera parking Jennifer's car and walking away. The figure, dressed in light-colored clothes and dark shoes, appeared to be between 5 feet 3 inches and 5 feet 5 inches tall, with a short haircut. But in a cruel twist of fate, the footage was grainy, and in every frame, the person's face was obscured by the bars of a fence, making identification impossible. The FBI and NASA were called in to enhance the video, but even their advanced technology couldn't reveal the individual's features. One journalist dubbed the figure the luckiest person of interest ever, a moniker that underscored the maddening elusiveness of the clue. Investigators analyzed the car for evidence, finding no fingerprints or DNA that could definitively point to a suspect. A search dog tracked a scent from the Malibu back to the Mosaic at Millenia, suggesting the person of interest may have returned to Jennifer's complex after abandoning the vehicle. The absence of valuables like Jennifer's iPod and DVD player in the car led detectives to rule out robbery as a motive. Instead, they began to suspect foul play, possibly an abduction. The Kesses clung to hope, but the lack of concrete leads was agonizing. Jennifer's employer, led by CEO David A. Siegel, offered a $1 million reward for information leading to her whereabouts, with the condition that she be found alive by July 4, 2007. A $5,000 reward was also available through Central Florida Crime Line for information about her remains. Despite the incentives, no credible tips emerged, and the reward went unclaimed. As the investigation unfolded, the Kess family grew increasingly frustrated with the Orlando Police Department's handling of the case. They felt the initial response was lackluster and that critical time had been lost. In 2017, Drew and Joyce took the unprecedented step of suing the OPD for access to Jennifer's case files, a move rarely seen in missing persons cases. The lawsuit was settled out of court in 2019, and the Kesses received over 16,000 pages of documents, along with hours of audio and video recordings. The files revealed details the family hadn't known, including the collection of DNA evidence from Jennifer's car. Contrary to earlier police claims that no DNA had been found, perhaps most chilling were photos of the car's hood, which appeared to show signs of a struggle. Smudges and marks suggesting someone had been thrown onto the hood and dragged off, with what looked like finger streaks trailing across the surface. The discovery was a gut punch, reinforcing the family's belief that Jennifer had been attacked. The Kesses hired private investigator Mike Toretta, a retired DEA agent, to review the case with fresh eyes. Toretta, who began working on the case in 2017, developed a theory that Jennifer was accosted as she locked her condo door, possibly from behind, and forced into a vacant apartment across the hall. The speed of the attack, he believed, left her with little chance to fight back. The presence of construction workers at the Mosaic at Millennia raised suspicions, particularly among the Kesses. Jennifer had expressed discomfort about the workers, some of whom she believed were staying in vacant units and making her feel uneasy. She had even filed a complaint with the property management about their behavior. A former housekeeper at the complex later told investigators that the person in the surveillance footage resembled a maintenance worker nicknamed Chino, who had worked in Jennifer's condo the week before her disappearance. Chino, who was in prison for a statutory rape charge at the time, was interviewed and passed a polygraph test, leading detectives to rule him out as a suspect. Other potential leads were explored but led to dead ends. Investigators looked into a manager at Jennifer's workplace who had shown romantic interest in her, but she had rebuffed his advances. After multiple interviews, he was cleared. A 20-year-old named Clemente Garcia, arrested for a 2007 rape, was questioned but could not be linked to Jennifer's case. In 2009, a convicted killer named David Russ, incarcerated in Seminole County Jail, claimed to have overheard inmates discussing Jennifer's case. He spoke directly with Drew Kess, but the information was vague and didn't lead to a breakthrough. In 2019, a tip prompted a search of a lake where construction workers had allegedly discarded a carpet, but divers found nothing. The Kesses also received threatening calls and messages from a man named Tyler Green, who targeted the family with menacing threats, including claims that Logan would be next. While disturbing, Green's actions were deemed unrelated to Jennifer's disappearance. The case gained significant media attention, appearing on shows like 48 Hours and Greta Investigates. In 2008, the Florida House of Representatives passed the Jennifer Kess and Tiffany Sessions Missing Persons Act, reforming how missing persons cases are handled in the state. The Kess's advocacy, alongside the family of another missing woman, Tiffany Sessions, led to changes that ensured quicker police responses and better coordination. Podcasts like Unconcluded and True Crime Chronicles brought renewed interest, with Unconcluded uncovering a tip from a Tennessee jewelry store worker who claimed to have seen someone resembling Jennifer months after her disappearance. The tip was reported to Crime Line, but police didn't follow up until the podcast highlighted it, prompting a change in how tips were routed to detectives. By 2010, the FBI took over the case at the urging of Orlando Police Chief Val Demings, but after reviewing the evidence, they returned it to the OPD in 2011 with recommendations for next steps. In 2018, the OPD assigned Detective Teresa Sprague to focus exclusively on Jennifer's case, and a Lynx bus wrapped with Jennifer's photo and the person of interest's image was deployed to raise awareness. A $15,000 reward was offered, but no significant leads emerged. In December 2022, the investigation was handed to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Cold Case Unit, which vowed to start from scratch, re-interviewing suspects and retesting evidence. The Kesses expressed cautious optimism, with Drew stating, "This is Jennifer's best chance at being found." Theories about Jennifer's fate abound, each steeped in speculation but lacking definitive proof. One theory, championed by Drew Kess, posits that Jennifer was a victim of human trafficking. He believes she may have been specifically targeted, perhaps to settle a debt or as part of a criminal enterprise. The idea is fueled by the absence of her body and the lack of evidence suggesting a random attack. Another theory points to the construction workers at her complex, given Jennifer's discomfort and the suspicious timing of her disappearance. Some speculate that an ex-boyfriend or a scorned suitor could be involved, though Rob Allen was cleared early on, and no evidence implicates others from her past. The workplace angle, including the manager who pursued her, was thoroughly investigated but yielded nothing. A less likely theory suggests Jennifer left voluntarily, but her stable life, strong family ties, and the evidence of a struggle on her car would make this improbable. The Kess family's relentless pursuit of answers has come at a staggering cost. By 2019, they had spent over $500,000 of their personal funds, including selling their home to cover legal fees and private investigator costs. Drew and Joyce have endured emotional and financial hardship, yet their resolve remains unshaken. They maintain a website, findjenniferkess.com, and a GoFundMe page to support their efforts. At CrimeCon 2023, Jennifer's uncle, Bill Gilmore, spoke about the case, highlighting the DNA evidence and signs of struggle in the car photos. He also shared details from his book about Jennifer's concerns over the construction workers, underscoring the family's belief that the answer lies within the mosaic at Millennia. As of April 2025, Jennifer Kess remains on the FBI's most wanted/missing list, classified as missing and endangered by multiple agencies, including the Orlando Police Department, the FDLE, and Interpol. Her family marks each anniversary of her disappearance with heart-shaped balloons at the mosaic at Millennia, a poignant tribute to the daughter and sister they refuse to forget. On the 19th anniversary in January 2025, they wrote, "How can a missing persons case with such awareness not produce even a direction 19 years later is inconceivable. Yet very true, and we, Jennifer's family and friends, live with that very real fact day in and day out. The pain of not knowing is a daily torment, but the Kesses hold on to hope, however faint, that a new tip, a re-examined piece of evidence, or a breakthrough in technology will finally bring Jennifer home." The surveillance footage of the person of interest remains the case's most haunting image, a shadowy figure slipping away, their identity concealed by a twist of fate. Enhanced by NASA, analyzed by the FBI, and plastered across flyers and buses, the grainy frames have become a symbol of the case's enduring mystery. The Kesses and their supporters believe this person holds the key to the truth, yet they remain a phantom, untouched by the passage of time. The marks on Jennifer's car hood, the scent trail back to her complex, the missing personal items, all are pieces of a puzzle that refuses to come together. True crime communities on platforms like Reddit and podcasts continue to dissect the case, with some speculating about systemic issues, such as biases in the investigation, while others focus on the lack of forensic advancements. Jennifer's disappearance is a stark reminder of the fragility of safety, even in a gated community, and the limitations of investigative resources. The Kesses fight has exposed flaws in how missing persons cases are handled, from the initial dismissal by police to the challenges of accessing case files. Their lawsuit against the OPD set a precedent, empowering other families to demand transparency. Yet, for all their efforts, the core question remains unanswered. What happened to Jennifer Kess? Was she taken by someone she knew, a stranger, or a group? Did she fall victim to a crime of opportunity or a calculated plan? The absence of her body, her belongings, and any definitive forensic evidence keeps the case in limbo, a cold case that burns hot in the hearts of those who love her. For the Kesses, the search is a lifelong mission. Drew has said, "Jennifer needs to come home. I will take her any way I can get her." The family's resilience is matched only by their grief, a duality that defines their existence. They've scoured lakes, chased leads across continents, and faced down threats, all in the name of a daughter whose smile still lights up their memories. The true crime community, from podcasters to amateur sleuths, keeps Jennifer's story alive, hoping to jog a memory or unearth a clue. The FDLE's renewed investigation offers a glimmer of possibility, But after nearly 2 decades, the path to closure is steep. Jennifer Kess' case is more than a mystery. It's a testament to love, loss, and the unyielding human spirit. Her disappearance shattered a family, yet it also galvanized them, turning their pain into a force for change. As the sun rises over Orlando each day, the city moves forward, but for the Kesses, time stands still, frozen in that January morning when Jennifer walked out her door and into the unknown. Somewhere, in the shadows of that surveillance footage or the depths of an unturned stone, the truth waits. Until it's found, Jennifer's story endures. A beacon of hope, a call for justice, and a reminder that some mysteries, no matter how elusive, refuse to be forgotten. In the quiet, affluent neighborhood of Jalvayu Vihar in Noida, India, the morning of May 16, 2008, dawned with a chilling discovery that would unravel a mystery still debated over a decade later. Arushi Talwar, a bright 13-year-old girl on the cusp of her 14th birthday, was found dead in her bedroom, her throat slit and her head bludgeoned. The gruesome scene was only the beginning of a case that would grip the nation, exposing flaws in investigative processes, sparking media frenzy, and leaving a family shattered. The Arushi Talwar murder case, often referred to as the 2008 Noida double murder case, is a labyrinth of conflicting evidence, shifting suspects, and a haunting question. Who killed Arushi Talwar and Hemraj Banjade? Arushi was the only child of Rajesh and Nupur Talwar, a successful dentist couple whose lives revolved around their daughter and their thriving careers. Rajesh, a graduate of Maulana Azad Medical College, headed the dental department at Fortis Hospital and ran a clinic in Noida's Sector 27, alongside his friend Anita Durrani. Nupur, equally accomplished, practiced at Fortis and a high-profile clinic in Khan Market, where her patients included a former prime minister. Their home, a modest flat in Noida's Sector 25, was a place of warmth, where Arushi, a Class 9 student at Delhi Public School, thrived. Known for her love of dancing, Bollywood star Shah Rukh Khan, and her ambition to become a doctor, Arushi was a vibrant teenager with a close-knit group of friends. She held a prestigious blue blazer at school, an honor for consistent academic excellence, and was the lead dancer in a group called the Awesome Foursome. Her 14th birthday, set for May 24th, was just days away, and excitement filled the air as she planned a sleepover with friends. The Talwar's household included Hemraj Banjade, a 45-year-old Nepali domestic worker who had been with them for 2 years. Reliable and trusted, Hemraj cooked, cleaned, and managed the daily needs of the family, sending money back to his wife, Kamkala, teenage son, Prajal, and elderly mother in Nepal. Described by Nupur as a kind man who took pride in small moments, like Arushi enjoying his Pollock painter for the first time, Hemraj was an integral part of their lives. The flat, L32, was close to the home of Arushi's maternal grandparents, Group Captain B.G. Chitnis, retired, and Lata Chitnis, a deliberate choice to ensure Arushi grew up surrounded by family. On May 15, 2008, the day began like any other. Nupur worked at her clinic from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., then picked Arushi up from school at 1:30 p.m. They returned to their flat, joined by Vandana Talwar, Rajesh's sister-in-law, for lunch. Afterward, Nupur and Vandana left, while Arushi stayed home. Nupur returned to Fortis Hospital from 4:30 p.m. to 7 p.m., arriving back at the flat around 7:30 p.m. Rajesh, meanwhile, taught at ITS Dental College until 3:30 p.m. and saw patients at the clinic until 8:30 p.m. He returned home around 9:30 p.m. with his driver, Umesh Sharma, who parked the car at Nupur's parents' nearby residence and walked back to hand over the keys and Rajesh's bag to Hemraj. Sharma glimpsed Nupur and Arushi near the dining table and Rajesh emerging from his bedroom, the last known outsider to see Arushi and Hemraj alive. That evening, the Talwars dined on Hemraj's meal of okra, lentils, and rotis. Afterward, Arushi retreated to her room, where a special moment unfolded. A Sony DSC W130 digital camera, delivered by courier that day, was meant to be her birthday gift. Unable to wait, Rajesh and Nupur decided to surprise her early. Around 10 p.m., they entered her room, presenting the camera. Arushi, thrilled, began clicking photos of herself and her parents, capturing joyful moments. The last photo, timestamped 10:10 p.m., showed Arushi beaming. She then began reading Chetan Bhagat's The 3 Mistakes of My Life, a novel that would later be found open on her bed. Around 11 p.m., Rajesh asked Nupur to switch on the internet router in Arushi's room, as he needed to send an email to the American Dentistry Association. Nupur complied, leaving the door key in the lock, and the family retired for the night. The air conditioners hummed loudly, a detail that would later become significant. The next morning, at 6 a.m., the family's part-time maid, Barty Mundell, arrived. The outer grill gate was locked from the outside, an unusual occurrence, as Hemraj typically opened it. Barty rang the doorbell, fixed next to the gate, but got no response. She pressed it again, then climbed the stairs to the terrace to fetch her cleaning supplies. Returning, she found the gate still locked. After ringing the bell a third time, Nupur appeared behind the inner iron mesh door, looking distressed. Barty asked for the key, and Nupur tossed it from the balcony. Barty climbed back up, unlatched the gate, and entered the flat. She heard Rajesh and Nupur weeping and sensed something was wrong. Nupur, embracing her, led her to Arushi's room and said, "Look what Hemraj has done." Barty saw Arushi's lifeless body, her throat slit, blood pooling on the bed and splattered on the walls. A camouflage school bag partially covered her face. Shocked, Barty rushed to alert neighbors, and chaos ensued. By 6:50 a.m., police arrived, followed by a crowd of friends, family, and curious onlookers. The media descended by 8 a.m., drawn to the sensational story of a murder in an upscale neighborhood. The police, led by the Noida force, declared it an open and shut case. Pinning the blame on Hemraj, who was missing, they offered a 20,000 rupee reward for his capture, alleging he had consumed whiskey, assaulted Arushi, and killed her with a kukri, a Nepali knife. However, the investigation was already faltering. The police failed to secure the crime scene, allowing over 100 people, journalists, neighbors, and strangers, to trample through the flat. Evidence was contaminated, fingerprints smudged, and bloodstains disturbed. The post-mortem report revealed Arushi died from a blunt force trauma to the forehead, causing a fatal clot, with her throat slit post-mortem with surgical precision. The absence of Hemraj fueled speculation, but Rajesh's complaint to the police named him as the killer, a claim that would soon unravel. On May 17th, a shocking discovery shifted the case. Hemraj's partially decomposed body was found on the terrace, locked from the inside. Like Arushi, his throat was slit, and his head bore blunt force injuries. Bloodstains on the staircase suggested his body had been dragged from the flat to the terrace. The police, criticized for not searching the terrace earlier, now faced a double murder. The locked terrace door and the absence of forced entry pointed to an insider job. Suspicion turned to the Talwars. On May 23rd, Noida police arrested Rajesh, alleging he killed Arushi and Hemraj after finding them in an objectionable position, a claim lacking forensic backing but fueled by media sensationalism. The accusation of an honor killing enraged the Talwars family and friends, who accused the police of framing them to cover up a botched investigation. Public outrage and media scrutiny, filled with salacious rumors about Arushi's character and the Talwars' marriage, prompted Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Mayawati to transfer the case to the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, on June 1st. The CBI, led by Joint Director Arun Kumar, took a different approach. They arrested Krishna Thadarai, Rajesh's Nepali clinic assistant, on June 13th, followed by two other domestic workers, Rajkumar and Vijay Mundell. Narcoanalysis tests, though inadmissible in court, suggested the three had attempted to sexually assault Arushi, with Hemraj killed for intervening. However, no physical evidence linked them to the crime, and they were released. The CBI's scientific tests, including a sound test, confirmed that the Talwar's air conditioners likely drowned out any noise from Arushi's room, weakening the claim they should have heard the murders. On July 11th, Rajesh was granted bail, with the CBI stating no evidence tied him to the crime. In 2009, a new CBI team took over, led by investigating officer AGL Call. Their approach shifted dramatically. They recommended closing the case, citing insufficient evidence, but named Rajesh as the sole suspect based on circumstantial factors. The locked flat, the keys to Arushi's room, and suspicious internet router activity showing logins past midnight. The Talwars opposed the closure, calling the suspicion baseless. In 2010, a special CBI court rejected the closure report, ordering a trial against Rajesh and Nupur. Nupur surrendered in 2012, joining Rajesh in Dasna jail. The prosecution's case hinged on the last seen theory, arguing that as the only survivors in the flat, the Talwars bore the burden of proof. They alleged Rajesh, enraged by an alleged affair or Arushi's relationship with Hemraj, killed them with a golf club and a scalpel. Yet, no blood or DNA was found on the golf clubs, and the scalpel was never recovered. Key evidence was marred by inconsistencies. A pillowcase, initially said to have Hemraj's blood and recovered from Arushi's room, was later clarified as seized from Hemraj's room, with only Arushi's DNA on her bedding. A bloodied handprint on the terrace and a scotch bottle yielded no clear fingerprints. Arushi's Nokia phone, recovered 15 months later, had its memory wiped. A vaginal swab, allegedly swapped at Noida's hospital, raised questions of tampering. The CBI's claim of Hemraj's blood on Arushi's pillow was debunked by forensic reports, and bloodstains on the stairs were attributed to police moving Hemraj's body. The defense argued the flat wasn't locked from the inside, as Barty Mundell's testimony suggested the outer gate was latched externally, pointing to an outsider's access. The media frenzy painted the Talwars as cold and calculating, with unfounded rumors of Rajesh's infidelity and Arushi's supposed promiscuity. The couple, grieving their daughter, faced a trial by media that overshadowed the legal proceedings. On November 26, 2013, the Ghaziabad CBI court convicted Rajesh and Nupur, sentencing them to life imprisonment. Judge Sham Lal cited circumstantial evidence, stating motive was secondary in such cases. The verdict sparked outrage, with critics arguing it relied on weak, tampered evidence and ignored the possibility of outsiders. The Talwars appealed to the Allahabad High Court, which, on October 12, 2017, acquitted them. Justices B.K. Narayana and A.K. Mishra ruled that the CBI failed to prove the flat was locked from the inside, noting Barty Mundell's testimony suggested external access. They dismissed the prosecution's claim of Hemraj's blood in Arushi's room and criticized the trial court's reliance on unproven assumptions. The 263-page verdict called the CBI's theory patently absurd, highlighting the possibility of an outsider's involvement. The Talwars, released from Dasna jail, returned to a society that had judged them harshly. Vandana Talwar, Arushi's aunt, expressed relief, while filmmaker Meghna Gulzar, whose film Talwar explored the case, noted the verdict validated the need for all narratives to be heard. The CBI and Hemraj's widow, Kumkala Banjade, appealed the acquittal to the Supreme Court in 2018, arguing the Talwars were wrongly cleared. The court admitted the pleas, but as of 2025, no final ruling has resolved the case. The mystery endures with no definitive answers. Was it an insider job, as the CBI initially claimed, or did an unknown assailant slip into the flat that night? Theories abound. Revenge against the Talwars, a crime of opportunity, or even a cover-up, but none fully explain the locked terrace, the cleaned crime scene, or the motive for such brutality. The Arushi Talwar case is more than a murder mystery. It's a mirror to India's investigative and judicial challenges. The Noida police's failure to secure the crime scene, the CBI's shifting narratives, and the media's role in shaping public perception highlight systemic flaws. For Rajesh and Nupur, the loss of their daughter is compounded by years of scrutiny and imprisonment. They continue to practice dentistry, even volunteering at Dasna jail post-release, but the pain of Arushi's absence lingers. Hemraj's family, too, mourns a man whose death became a footnote in a sensational saga. 16 years later, the question remains: who killed Arushi Talwar and Hemraj Banjade? The answer, buried in a tangle of contaminated evidence and conflicting stories, may never surface. The case, immortalized in books, films, and endless debates, is a haunting reminder that truth can be as elusive as justice. In the quiet, sunlit streets of Bondi, Sydney, in the winter of 1960, a tragedy unfolded that would etch itself into the annals of Australian history. The kidnapping and murder of 8-year-old Graham Thorne, a crime orchestrated by Stephen Leslie Bradley, was not just a heinous act of violence but a watershed moment that exposed the vulnerability of ordinary families and introduced Australia to the chilling reality of modern crime. This was a case driven by greed, desperation, and a man's delusion of grandeur, one that captivated the nation and forever changed the way Australians viewed safety, trust, and the burgeoning field of forensic science. Stephen Leslie Bradley, born István Barany in Budapest, Hungary in 1926, was a man who seemed perpetually at odds with his circumstances. Emigrating to Australia in 1950 after a tumultuous early life marked by the chaos of World War II, Bradley arrived with ambitions that far outstripped his means. Short, stocky, and balding, with a penchant for flashy clothes and big cars, he cultivated an image of success that belied his constant financial struggles. Prison authorities would later describe him as tense, insecure, yet intelligent, a man with a sociable demeanor but a pathological tendency to lie and manipulate. He was a confidence man, always chasing the next big scheme to lift him out of his self-perceived mediocrity. By the late 1950s, Bradley's life was a series of failures. Failed businesses, fraudulent schemes, and a marriage that masked his growing desperation. In 1958, he married Magda Whitman, a Hungarian divorcee with 2 children, who owned a boarding house in Katoomba. When the boarding house burned down in 1959, Bradley's hopes of profiting from the insurance settlement were dashed, plunging him deeper into debt and frustration. It was in this state of mind, resentful, restless, and determined to do something big, that he set his sights on a crime that would make him infamous. The spark for Bradley's plan came in June 1960, when newspapers across Sydney trumpeted the news of a lottery win that captured the public's imagination. Basil Henry Parker Thorne, a modest traveling salesman from Bondi, had won £100,000 in the Sydney Opera House lottery, an enormous sum equivalent to millions of dollars today. The Opera House, still a dream in architect sketches, was being funded through such lotteries, and the Thorne family's windfall was front-page news. Basil and his wife, Frida, were ordinary Australians, living in a modest flat at 1A Edward Street with their 2 children, Graham, aged 8, and Belinda, aged 3. The family's sudden wealth made them local celebrities. Their address and details splashed across newspapers for all to see. For Bradley, who was always on the lookout for an opportunity, the Thorne family represented a golden ticket. He didn't want to work for his fortune. He wanted to take it. Bradley's scheme was as audacious as it was cruel. He decided to kidnap Graham Thorne, the family's only son, and demand a ransom that would secure his financial future. In the Australia of 1960, kidnapping was almost unheard of, a crime more suited to American gangster films than the laid-back suburbs of Sydney. But Bradley, with his inflated sense of cunning, believed he could pull it off. He began meticulously planning, staking out the Thorne family's movements and learning their routines. He noted that Graham walked to school each morning, often alone, along the quiet streets of Bondi. Bradley's boarding house background had given him some experience in observing people, and he used this to his advantage, blending into the neighborhood as he watched and waited. On the morning of July 7, 1960, the streets of Bondi were bathed in the pale light of a winter dawn. Graham Thorne, a slight boy with a cheerful disposition, left his family's flat around 8:30 a.m. to meet a family friend, Phyllis Smith, who usually drove him to Scott's College, his school in Bellevue Hill. It was a routine he followed most days, and that morning seemed no different. Graham, dressed in his school uniform, waved goodbye to his mother and set off toward Wellington Street, where Phyllis was waiting. But Graham never reached her car. As Phyllis grew anxious, checking her watch and scanning the street, she realized something was terribly wrong. She drove to the Thorne family's flat to alert Frida, who immediately called the police. The nightmare that would grip Sydney had begun. Unbeknownst to the Thorne family, Stephen Bradley had been lying in wait. Driving a blue Ford Falcon, he approached Graham on Wellington Street, just a short distance from his home. Bradley, with his practiced charm, likely lured the boy into the car under a pretext, perhaps claiming he was sent by Graham's parents or offering a ride to school. Graham, trusting and unaware of the danger, got into the vehicle. Bradley drove away, taking the boy to a secluded spot in Centennial Park, a sprawling green space not far from Bondi. There, in a moment of cold calculation, Bradley's plan began to unravel. Whether out of panic, fear of discovery, or sheer ruthlessness, he killed Graham, smothering or strangling the boy and hiding his body in a crevice among rocks and bushes. The kidnapping, meant to be a quick path to riches, had turned into a murder. Back in Bondi, the Thorne family's world was collapsing. By mid-morning, police were swarming the neighborhood, interviewing neighbors and retracing Graham's steps. The news of the kidnapping spread like wildfire, dominating radio broadcasts and newspaper headlines. Australia had never seen a crime like this. A child snatched from a suburban street in broad daylight. The public was horrified, and the pressure on the police to find Graham was immense. At 9:40 a.m., the Thornes received a phone call that deepened their terror. A man with a guttural accent, later identified as Bradley, demanded £25,000 for Graham's safe return, warning, "If you don't get the money, I'll feed him to the sharks." The call was brief, but it galvanized the police, who set up a surveillance operation at the Thorne home, hoping the kidnapper would call again. Bradley, however, was already spiraling. After killing Graham, he returned to his home in Clontarf, a northern suburb of Sydney, and began crafting his ransom demands. He made a second call to the Thorne household later that day, reiterating his demand for £25,000 and instructing Basil Thorne to place an advertisement in the Sydney Morning Herald as a signal of compliance. But Bradley's confidence was crumbling. He had not anticipated the scale of the police response or the public's outrage. The murder of Graham, whether premeditated or a panicked reaction, had made his plan untenable. Instead of collecting the ransom, Bradley began covering his tracks, disposing of evidence and preparing to flee. The police, meanwhile, were mobilizing one of the largest manhunts in Australian history. Led by Detective Sergeant Ray Kelly, a seasoned investigator known for his tenacity, the New South Wales police force threw every resource into the case. They interviewed hundreds of witnesses, followed up on tips from the public, and scoured Sydney for any sign of Graham. The ransom calls provided a crucial lead. The caller's accent, described as European or possibly Hungarian, narrowed the suspect pool. Police also traced the calls to public phone booths, indicating the kidnapper was cautious but not infallible. As days turned into weeks, the hope of finding Graham alive began to fade, replaced by a grim determination to catch his abductor. On August 16, 1960, 6 weeks after Graham's disappearance, a group of children playing in Seaforth, a suburb near Manly, stumbled upon a gruesome discovery. Hidden under a rock ledge in a vacant lot was the body of Graham Thorne, wrapped in a rug and partially decomposed. The news sent shockwaves through Sydney, turning public fear into collective grief. Frida and Basil Thorne, who had clung to the hope of their son's return, were devastated. The discovery of Graham's body shifted the investigation from a kidnapping to a murder case, and the police doubled their efforts to find the killer. The rug in which Graham's body was wrapped became a pivotal piece of evidence. Forensic experts, in what was then a groundbreaking application of science to crime solving, analyzed the rug meticulously. They found traces of pink mortar, pet hairs, and plant material, including cypress leaves, clinging to the fabric. These clues suggested the rug had come from a specific location, and the police began a painstaking search to match them. The pink mortar was particularly distinctive, as it was not commonly used in Sydney homes. Forensic botanists identified the cypress leaves as belonging to a specific species, Cupressus glabra, further narrowing the search. This was a turning point in Australian criminal investigations, as such forensic techniques, combining botany, chemistry, and microscopy, had never been used so extensively in a single case. The police also canvassed rug manufacturers and retailers, tracing the rug's distinctive pattern to a batch sold in Sydney. They interviewed neighbors in Seaforth, where Graham's body was found, and learned of a man with a foreign accent who had recently moved out of a nearby house. This led them to a property at 28 Moore Street in Clontarf, where Bradley and his family had lived. A search of the house revealed pink mortar in the backyard, matching the traces found on the rug. Cypress trees of the same species were growing on the property, and pet hairs from the Bradley's dog were consistent with those on the rug. The evidence was mounting, but Bradley was no longer in Sydney. He had fled, sensing the net closing in. Bradley's unraveling began shortly after the murder. In late July, he booked passage for himself, Magda, and her 2 children on a ship to London, claiming they were visiting family. On October 10, 1960, as the ship docked in Colombo, Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, Bradley was arrested by local police acting on a warrant from Australia. The international manhunt had succeeded, and Bradley was extradited back to Sydney to face justice. His arrest was a media sensation, with newspapers detailing his every move and speculating about his motives. For the Australian public, Bradley was no longer just a criminal. He was a monster who had violated the sanctity of childhood. The trial of Stephen Leslie Bradley began on March 20, 1961, at the Central Criminal Court in Darlinghurst, Sydney. The courtroom was packed with reporters, spectators, and a public hungry for justice. Bradley, dressed in a sharp suit, maintained a calm demeanor, but his story was full of contradictions. He initially confessed to the kidnapping and murder, claiming he had acted alone and killed Graham accidentally while trying to quiet him. But he later recanted, alleging the confession was coerced out of fear for his family's safety. The prosecution, led by Crown Prosecutor W.J. Knight, QC, presented a meticulous case, weaving together forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and Bradley's own incriminating actions.